Chapter 1478. In the depths of the ground, a ray of clear light shone down. When it slowly dissipated, Zhang Yan's doppelganger appeared from within. He sensed that there was a faintly discernible aura in the depths of the cave, but at this moment, it was constantly moving away, as if it was trying to avoid it. He couldn't help but think to himself, this thing is indeed not a dead thing, but it has spirituality. Everything in the world, as long as it has spirituality, it would know how to seek benefits and avoid harm. Previously, this thing did not avoid Yuan Jianqing, but that was because the latter's power was not enough to hurt it. But this time, it was different. Zhang Yan's aura was so strong that even the blood essence that enveloped the entire planet almost couldn't withstand it. Even if it was only a doppelganger, it would still pose a serious threat to it. Zhang Yan's doppelganger didn't immediately chase after it. That thing had been trapped here for more than 10,000 years, which meant that there was a way out. Therefore, as long as it was still on this planet, there was no need to worry about where it could escape to. Glancing around, the situation here was roughly the same as what his disciple, Yuan Jianqing, had said. The two auras clashed with each other, and after a long period of wear and tear, the changes in front of him appeared. After observing for a while, he had a rough idea of the ability of this thing. It didn't have any powerful means, or rather, it couldn't use them at all. It could only take advantage of the situation and look for loopholes. But in this aspect, in fact, it was actually more brilliant than blindly using brute force. After checking out the situation, he slowly followed it. After about half a day, the road had come to an end. He could feel that the thing had shrunk into a pit in front of him and was motionless. According to his disciple, Yuan Jianqing, this thing would emit a faint light. But at this moment he was already not far away, but he couldn't see it. He thought for a while and understood that this should be the spiritual thing concealing itself. But since he was already here, he had a clear goal, and any disguise would be useless. Not long after, the clone finally arrived at the deepest part of the cave and saw the object with a single glance. At first glance, it was indeed a ball of soft and beautiful jade. However, that was only its appearance. In his eyes, there was clearly a ball of thought entrusted to it. A living being's will was formless and intangible. However, once a living being reached a certain realm, they would be able to manifest it in a certain way and be seen by their peers. Zhang Yan could clearly feel that this item was not an innate one, nor was it the handiwork of a human cultivator. Without the suppression of the blood essence, if the jade of consciousness was allowed to spread, the demons and monsters of this planet would soon gain sentience. However, the demons and monsters themselves would also be slowly consumed until they turned into nothingness. Therefore, the essence blood didn't completely suppress it, but it also protected it. However, this couldn't completely stop the jade of consciousness. For example, the feathered fur coat was probably born under the influence of this item. When Zhang Yan arrived here, he could truly understand why the jade of consciousness did this. Under the influence of the drop of essence blood, the violent and ferocious monsters would only be driven by their instincts. They only knew how to kill and hunt, and it was almost impossible for them to cultivate. With such a huge amount of spiritual vigor, they didn't know how to use it. The feathered fur coat was probably the only living being on this planet that had sentience. It could be imagined that under the influence of the jade of consciousness, it would gradually understand the method of cultivation. As its cultivation level increased, it would also be more eager to obtain the jade. Under such circumstances, it would definitely use all its strength to dig the crack in the ground and take it out. This would also achieve the purpose of the jade of consciousness's escape. Zhang Yan was very interested in this item. However, he changed his mind. It was not easy to uncover the secret of the jade of consciousness. This was because once the consciousness resisted, it would be very difficult to break through. If he tried to force it, he was afraid that he would rather be destroyed than get any results. After thinking for a while, he decided to keep it first. As long as this item was in his hands, there would always be a way. Now, the focus should be on the foreign species that left behind the essence blood. However, he didn't immediately reach out to take it. Before that, he made some arrangements. These two chi dynamics had been entangled here for more than 10,000 years, and they had reached a delicate balance. It could be said that it was closely related to the landscape of the entire planet and the reproduction of living beings. If he suddenly broke this balance, it would most likely cause irreparable damage. He still wanted to run this place as a secondary residence, so he naturally didn't want to see this result. After some consideration, he decided to set up a formation here. This formation needed to fill the gap left after taking away the jade of consciousness, and also to ease the tyrannical breath in the essence blood. In addition, it could better make full use of the rich spiritual vigor here. With an idea in mind, he began to try to predict the changes of spiritual vigor in this planet. The spiritual vigor that was triggered by the essence blood was not static. When the essence blood was exhausted, everything would return to its original state. After this round of calculation, he now estimated that after about 50,000 years, this drop of essence blood would officially enter the day of decline. After that, the rate of decline would get faster and faster, and in just a short 100 years, it would disappear completely. Even if there were some remnants, they would only be left in some special boundaries and would no longer affect the entire planet. Originally, after 10,000 years of nourishment, there were many spiritual mountains and beautiful rivers on the ground. However, this time was still too short, and the spiritual veins that were nurtured were still very weak compared to the entire planet. Perhaps, it would be destroyed by a natural disaster. What he needed to do was to find a way to extend this process, and try his best to slow down the dissipation of the spiritual vigor. When the mountain and water spiritual veins were truly mature, then there would be no need to waste any more effort on it. This shadow avatar waved his sleeves, and brought out many precious materials from the small world. He also sacrificially refined a few formation flags on the spot, and then scattered them in the cave. This was the first time he personally set up a formation after attaining mortal shedding. Compared to before, there was a different feeling. He recalled the various changes in the past, and in his spirit, he deduced the various changes related to the future, and compared them with each other. Gradually, there was a strange feeling in his heart. The current him and the past seemed to have become two completely different people. However, without the past, there would not be the present. However, when he reached this state, there would not be any thoughts of the present, and the past would not exist. If this was the case, the past might not be the past, and only existed in his thoughts, and there would no longer be a clear boundary between reality and illusion. At this moment, he seemed to have touched something, and fell into deep thought. Unknowingly, his spirit continued to rise, and his entire person seemed to be flying forward. At this moment, he had a clear feeling that if he allowed this process to continue, he might be able to successfully cut off his past body. However, at this moment, he decisively and calmly withdrew from this mysterious state. Currently, his accumulated FA power was not sufficient. Borrowing this unexpected opportunity, he was able to step into the second level in one go. In the future, it would be much more difficult for him to advance further. If it was serious, he might not even be able to see the higher levels. Looking at the results, this was actually a demonic barrier. The benefits that he saw now might not necessarily be the real benefits, and the fate of the present might not necessarily be the creation of the future. He thought that on his path of cultivation, there was no need to look into the sudden changes in perception. He only needed to follow the prescribed order, accumulate his cultivation, and when the time was right, he would naturally be able to cross the threshold. Of course, this was also the reason why he could make such a choice, and it was not suitable for the lower generation cultivators. Even if there was an opportunity, it would be better to grasp it firmly, otherwise, there would be no future to talk about. He shook his head with a smile, then cast these thoughts aside and focused on setting up the spell formation. As his mana fell, the restrictive spell formation gradually expanded in the cavern. 10 days passed quickly, and a huge spell formation appeared in the cavern. As it operated, it not only calmed down the previously oppressive spiritual energy, but also slowly retracted it to maintain its own circulation. This was not a blind demand, but rather a gradual return of the spiritual energy to the mountains, rivers, and earth. Seeing that he had succeeded, the clone withdrew his mana. Even without the will jade, it would not have much of an effect on the crimson scorching earth. Therefore, he waved his sleeve and sucked it in, then transformed into a beam of clear light that shot out of the earth to meet up with his real body. Zhang Yan looked down at the crimson planet below him. The next thing he needed to do was to find the owner of the essence blood and eliminate any potential dangers in the mountain and sea realm. There was a simple method that he could try. If the owner of the will jade had been placed here to suppress and protect the essence blood, then they might not have been completely at ease. It was likely that they had left behind some sort of warning device, and if the essence blood stirred, they might be able to sense it. If the owner of this blood essence was still alive, he would definitely come to check it out. All he had to do was wait here. If he didn't come after a long time, based on the lifespan he had previously deduced, it was very likely that he was already dead, unless he didn't have the ability to come. Unfortunately, so much time had passed and anything could go wrong. In order to play it safe, he used some of his magic to throw the essence blood's aura into chaos. If the owner of the essence blood still didn't show up, then there was nothing to worry about. Having done that, he sent the guinea pig out to stand guard, while he sat down in the palace, cultivating and waiting patiently. He had prepared quite a bit of violet pure spirit chi before leaving. Cultivating here would not be any slower than in the mountain and sea realm. In order to avoid any mishaps, he didn't go back to the lesser realm to refine the magical item. Instead, he left the matter to the mountain and river child. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. One day, as Zhang Yan was cultivating, he suddenly heard a strange sound reverberating in the sky. The sound was very rhythmic, like a low chant, but also like a light singing. This was not a normal sound, but a direct response. He opened his eyes and used his divine will to find the source. Suddenly, a strange bird with white wings appeared in front of him. The strange bird didn't seem to notice his gaze. Clearly, the sound just now was also unintentional. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment, but he still couldn't confirm whether or not this bird had anything to do with the owner of the essence blood. After all, there were many unknown monsters in the void, and the spiritual chi on the scarlet scorching earth star was abundant, so it wasn't strange for it to attract them. Also, if the owner of the essence blood was a bit more cunning, he could also send a few unrelated monsters to test it out. As for whether or not it was true, he would find out when it came. Chapter 1479. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? To provide you with wonderful novels to read. The white-feathered strange bird gradually flew closer to the crimson earth star, but it did not land. Instead, it circled around the entire earth star, as if it was looking for something. Zhang Yan had already restrained his qi to the point where it was faintly discernible, so as not to scare the strange bird away. He did not make a move, but just watched from the side. From the behavior of the strange bird, it seemed to have a purpose for coming here. After the white-feathered strange bird hovered for a long time, it gently sucked in the red light. After a while, a faint red light appeared on its body, but it only lasted for a moment before disappearing. Zhang Yan understood the intention of this. It was using the strong spiritual vigor emitted from the blood essence to refine itself. However, this strange white-feathered bird knew how to make a trade-off and was not greedy. It actually knew that if too much blood essence was absorbed, it would cause itself to be lost, causing it to become like those demons who only knew how to chase after their instincts, so it only took a small amount. Whether this was taught by others or its own perception, it was still not sure, but if it was the former, it was very worth investigating. The strange white-feathered bird stayed here for more than 100 days, but it did not go deep into the Earth star, so it turned around and left. Before it left, Zhang Yan placed a strand of his aura on its body, preparing to see just where the strange bird would go. His true body would remain here. This wait lasted for another 3 years, except for the big bird from before, no other creatures came. On the other side, the white-feathered strange bird had already arrived on a dark blue star. The surface of this star was almost completely covered in seawater, and there were only a few pieces of land. The rest were all mountain islands that protruded from the surface of the water, and they were scattered in all directions. The place where the strange bird lived was on a towering tree that reached into the clouds. The branches of this tree were pure white, and all the birds that lived here were this kind of white-feathered bird. The one that came to the Crimson Earth first was the largest, and it seemed to be the leader of the flock. The nest it resided in was incomparably huge. It was just slightly below the top of the white tree, and was covered by a huge leaf. The nest was not flat, but had many levels. The interior was as vast as a mountain, and there were all kinds of strange flowers and plants growing there. About 1,000 strange birds were circling in the air. Zhang Yan observed the Earth star through the eyes of the strange bird. Most of the ordinary demon birds here lived by hunting for giant fish in the sea. They only needed 1 day to hunt, but they needed 3 times the time to rest. However, this was not the case for all of them. Because the whitewood could disperse spiritual vigor, it seemed that the leader of the strange bird lived by absorbing spiritual vigor. He noticed that every night there would be a layer of faint glow circling around its body. This was a sign that it was about to transform. It was rare for a demon with a naturally strong body to succeed in transforming into a human form unless they had obtained a precious medicine or guidance from a powerful being. As for cultivation methods, these wild demons were scattered all over the place. Even if they obtained it, it would be useless. Without someone to teach them the profound Tao and dispel their doubts, there was nothing they could not cultivate. The steps of the leader of the strange bird were very regular. Based on this, it could be deduced that it should have obtained some kind of opportunity. Looking at its behavior in the Crimson Earth Star, it was very likely that this was the arrangement left behind by the owner of the blood essence. Of course, all of this was just Zhang Yan's guess, but it was very easy to determine whether this was the case. He raised his sleeve and once again stirred up the spiritual vigor on the Crimson Earth Star. If the bird demon was alarmed, then it could be confirmed that there was a connection between the two. Not long after, the big white-feathered bird suddenly became a little irritated. It kept flapping its wings and looked at the sky from time to time. Sometimes it would fly up, and after a while it would land back to its nest. This repeated several times. Zhang Yan smiled faintly. The result was self-evident. The demon bird came here first to devour the spiritual vigor and also to check the situation. However, the problem was that he did not change much of the spiritual vigor environment of the Crimson Earth Star. He only made some slight changes. After all, it was just a bird. It was not very sensitive to the changes of spiritual vigor, so it did not notice anything. Although the white-feathered demon bird noticed the abnormality in some way, it still refused to leave. This was because it was about to transform. During this transformation, it needed to go through a huge amount of spiritual vigor. Not to mention that it would take a lot of time to go back and forth. There was no spiritual vigor for it to devour in the virtual sky. However, transforming was not something that could be stopped easily. If this opportunity was missed, then the next time might not be successful, and it was very likely that it would not be able to do it in the future. Zhang Yan did not care how it would choose. As long as it was confirmed that this demon was indeed related to the owner of the blood essence, then he could follow this clue to investigate. In the end, the strange white-feathered bird did not go to the Crimson Earth Star. From this point, it could be seen that the owner of the blood essence did not have a strong control over it. Perhaps, after such a long time, the means that had been set up earlier had been greatly weakened. Nearly a month later, the demon bird was shrouded in a ball of white light. It lay motionless in its nest. After a whole year, the brilliance gradually faded, and a beautiful and slender woman dressed in a white feather dress appeared. Just now, she came out and floated to the front of a clear lake. Using the water as a mirror, she looked at herself and took a piece of whitewood branch to make a comb. She slowly combed her long hair by the lake. However, she did not forget about the matter on the Crimson Earth Star. After staying here for a few days, she returned to her original form. She flapped her wings and flew towards the virtual sky. This time, her speed was extremely fast. In less than 2 years, she arrived at the destination. She circled around the Crimson Earth Star several times. She did not find anything different from the previous time. Seeing that there was no abnormality, she did not have the mood to stay here. She turned back. However, she did not go far when she suddenly felt an invisible whaley pressing down on her. After a moment of dizziness, she was shocked to find that she had landed in a palace. She immediately knew that she had encountered a mighty person. Fortunately, she had a similar experience before, so she did not panic. She calmed her mind and knelt on the ground. She said, "May I know which master is here? West Fuzi pays her respects here." A clear voice seemed to come from the sky. "Come to the palace to talk." West Fuzi responded and walked into the main hall. She saw a Taoist in a black robe sitting on a jade platform. Just now, when she wanted to look at his appearance, she felt dizzy and almost fell. Her chi dynamic became chaotic. Her face turned pale and she did not dare to look anymore. She knelt on the ground and said, "Greetings, Celestial Master." Then she asked nervously, "May I know what orders do you have for me to come here?" Zhang Yan looked down from his seat and said, "Do you have anything to do with this Earth star?" West Fuzi shuddered a little and said, "Master, I have nothing to do with this Earth star. But a long time ago, a mighty being came to me and asked me to guard this place. He asked me to not let any foreign species disturb the spiritual vigor of the Earth star. He also gave me some pointers. I am indebted to him. So, I come here to guard this place every once in a while." Zhang Yan could tell that she was telling the truth. He asked, "How long did the fellow Taoist give you pointers, and where did he go in the end?" West Fuzi bowed his head and replied, "This mighty being stayed in this little demon's abode for a very long time. I don't know the exact time, but the sun and moon alternated about 10,000 times. Then he flew away and this little demon has never seen him since." Zhang Yan calculated in his heart. According to the bird demon's location, that person must have stayed in the realm for about 30 years. From the blood essence, he could tell that he did not have long to live. He might not live more than 100 years. He stayed here for so long, and it was very likely that he was making arrangements for his death. If what he did later was true, he knew that his life was near and did not want to come back. Therefore, he asked this bird demon to guard him and left the mountain and sea realm. He thought for a while and said, "Did that fellow Taoist give me any special instructions?" West Fuzi thought for a while and said, "He didn't say anything special." Zhang Yan said, "You've been looking after this place for so many years. Have you ever thought that there might be some unique treasures left on the planet? Have you ever thought about going in and exploring it?" West Fuzi said in a low voice, "I have thought about it. However, even that mighty person treated it with great caution. How could I dare to covet it? Even if I took it, I would have to bear the karma. It doesn't belong to me in the first place. Even if I took it, I wouldn't have the good fortune to enjoy it. It's better to just accept it and return peace." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Oh, so you also know about the karma of cultivators. Did you comprehend it yourself?" West Fuzi was surprised and said, "That's not it. After receiving the guidance of that mighty person, my memories gained many things that I didn't understand before. Even now, I still can't comprehend them. Just now, I've gained some understanding. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to answer Immortal Master's questions." Zhang Yan asked again, "Did that fellow Taoist say that if you encountered an enemy that you couldn't defend against, what would you do?" West Fuzi looked up and said, "That mighty person said that if I encountered someone that I couldn't defend against, then there was no need to worry about this place. Protecting my own life is the most important thing." Zhang Yan nodded and thought to himself, "In that case, he must be someone with a Tao." By saying that he had a Tao, he meant that he had roots. Perhaps he came from some sect with a legacy. The demons, devils, and outsiders of the mountain and sea realm didn't care about such things. If he encountered something like this, he would definitely say that he would defend to the death. As for whether he lived or died, that had nothing to do with him. But this person didn't want to risk his life when dealing with a wild demon. That was enough to show that he was pure in nature. That, coupled with his previous methods, was not something that ordinary outsiders could cultivate. He thought for a moment and said, "Did this fellow Taoist leave behind any records?" West Fuzi said, "He did. It was a tortoise shell with many strange characters on it. However, I couldn't understand them." She hesitated for a moment and then said, "I am willing to offer this item to you, Immortal Master." Zhang Yan was surprised. He had just asked casually and hadn't expected that there would really be such a thing. Perhaps he could deduce the origin of this person. He smiled and said, "I want this item of yours. I'll take it for a moment and then return it to you. I won't look at it for nothing. I'll give some benefits to your clan in exchange." Chapter 1480. A genius in 1 second remembers Love Go? To provide you with wonderful novels to read. When West Fuzi heard this, she was terrified. Just now, she didn't mention anything about her tribe, but Zhang Yan knew about it. She felt that there was nothing to hide in front of this person. She trembled and said, "Yes, this little demon will go get it for Celestial Master." Zhang Yan understood that this bird demon was so proactive because she was afraid that he would harm her tribe if he went to her territory. However, he didn't plan to do so, so he said, "Slow down. With your speed, this is already very fast. Since you know how to cultivate, I will teach you a technique. Memorize it." As he said this, he pointed a finger and a spirit light flew into the space between her eyebrows. West Fuzi was stunned for a moment, but her eyes lit up with gratitude. She kowtowed and said, "Thank you, Celestial Master, for the technique." The technique Zhang Yan gave her was based on her habits and characteristics. It was a technique he created with 9 numbers. With his current cultivation base, if he were to carefully deduce a technique, it could be regarded as a secret technique in an ordinary sect. If he were to delve deeper into this technique, there would be a lot of room for improvement. However, with West Fuzi's ability, she couldn't comprehend anything too profound, so a shallow one was just right. If you want to master it, it will take a long time. You can slowly comprehend it on the way back. West Fuzi quickly nodded and said, "Then this little demon will go now." Before she left, she didn't forget to bow to Zhang Yan and left the hall. When she was outside, she changed back to her original form and flew away. On the other hand, Zhang Yan cultivated in the temple and paid no attention to the affairs of the outside world. After sitting in seclusion here for 3 years, he suddenly sensed something and knew that the other party had returned. With a command in his heart, he opened the restrictions on the temple door. A white shadow flew in and turned into a woman in a white feather dress. She came up to the hall and bowed, "Celestial Master, please forgive me, this little demon is late." Zhang Yan said, "It's not bad. If you had used your original movement technique, it would have taken at least twice as long. It seems that your comprehension of the movement technique isn't slow." West Fuzi blushed and said with embarrassment, "This little demon is still slow. There are many things I don't understand." Zhang Yan said, "Cultivation is difficult. It hasn't been long since you obtained the cultivation technique, so your current achievement is not bad." West Fuzi turned her wrist and untied the tortoise shell from the knot. She held it up and said, "This is the item left behind by that Almighty. Please take a look." With a single thought from Zhang Yan, the tortoise shell flew up from her hand and hovered in front of her. It was just an ordinary tortoise shell, but there were many characters engraved on it. Unsurprisingly, they were erosion characters. This person clearly had a sex inheritance. It was an ordinary tortoise shell, but it was engraved with many characters. As expected, they were erosion symbols, which indicated that this person had inherited the legacy of a sect. He couldn't help but be slightly surprised because this didn't seem like something that a figure that had attained success in the Tao should display at all. It was very unlikely that Qin was acting like this because his lifespan was about to come to an end. Not to mention that cultivators could reincarnate. Any cultivator that had attained this level of cultivation had a lifespan of a few thousand or even 10,000 years. If they had seen through all of this, why would they put on such an act? Other than being laughed at by their fellow Taoists, there was no other use. If all of these were to make a cultivator of this level feel so depressed, then it could be said that he had encountered an unprecedented calamity and couldn't see any hope. Perhaps it was because the sect had declined and its inheritance had been severed because of this, and even if he reincarnated, he didn't know where he should go. Because of this, not only did he not know the origin of this item, but he was even more suspicious. This person had already arrived in the mountain and sea realm. Even if something major happened, she would still be the only one left of her sect, and the legacy could still be passed on. And yet, she hadn't chosen to do so. Did she think it was useless, or had she given up? He looked at the tortoise shell again, and then shook his head. Regardless of what had happened in the past, this person had already passed on for tens of thousands of years. At the very least, the mountain and sea realm was still peaceful. Since it couldn't affect him, there was no need to think too deeply about it. After pondering for a moment, he put the item away and looked down. Seeing West Fuzi still kneeling there, he nodded. This demonic bird was born with a kind and gentle temperament, and it could even fly through the void. If the junior disciples could become friends with it, they would be able to go to many places that they couldn't go, and cultivators with high cultivation wouldn't have to do everything for them. Love go, smalt sage neku, he said. West Fuzi, your people have been living in your own territory for a long time. Have you ever thought about communicating with the outside world? For example, my mountain and sea land is boundless and rich in spiritual opportunity. It's a good place to go, and it's better for your people to multiply. West Fuzi gathered up her courage and asked where the mountain and sea land was. She couldn't help but be tempted. Her Earth star was too remote, and it limited the number of people living there. Moreover, she gradually felt that she didn't have enough spiritual opportunity. Even with the red scorching Earth star, she could only absorb spiritual opportunity bit by bit. It would have been fine before she took human form, but after she became a human, the absorption of spiritual opportunity became even faster. That was quite embarrassing. The best way was to go to a place where spiritual opportunity flourished. However, she was also worried that if she came into contact with people from the outside world, she would expose her location, and her people would be enslaved and imprisoned. But if she didn't agree, would the person above her get angry and turn against her? Seeing that she was hesitating, Zhang Yan smiled and said, "This is up to you, I won't force you." West Fuzi lowered her head and thought for a long time. This celestial master even knew her return route so accurately. She was afraid that the location of her lair had already been exposed. It was a rare opportunity. If she missed it this time, she could only slowly die of old age in her lair. Thinking of this, she gritted her teeth and said, "I'm willing to go to the mountain and sea land." Zhang Yan smiled and flicked his finger. A divine light went into her eyebrows and said, "I've told you the location of the mountain and sea land. You can think about it when you go back or not." West Fuzi only felt that there was an additional star position chart in her mind. Before she could take a closer look, she felt her body lightened and found that she had landed in the void. The palace was nowhere to be seen, and she had no idea where it went. Only the red scorching Earth star was still not far away. She turned around and changed back to her original form and flew back to where she came from. At this time, Zhang Yan was driving the palace back to the mountain and sea land. After half a year, he returned to the sect and explained everything to the sect leader before going into seclusion again. At this time, whether it was the mountain and sea realm, the Junshan realm, or the Hornflower realm, nothing major happened. Just like that, 100 years passed peacefully. In the Jade Pot realm of the Junshan realm, the Gong brothers had been imprisoned here for more than 100 years after they swore an oath. The agreed time had long passed, but for some reason, they would rather be trapped here than go out. Rao Jifeng thought that they were afraid of the cultivators of the 9 continents attacking them. He couldn't be sure about this, so he let them be. For him and the disciples of the Devil sect, there were only benefits. In the depths of the small realm, a huge dragon was lying down. Under its claws were 2 scarlet blood suns that shone incessantly. The Gong brothers, Gong Chang and Gong Xiao, were sitting cross-legged under the dragon's claws. Their foundations were strong, and their auras were not much weaker than when they were imprisoned. Gong Chang suddenly grumbled and said, "Old Xiao, how long are we going to stay in this damned place?" Gong Xiao had a normal expression and said, "Be patient. I keep feeling that something is wrong. There is no danger or pain here, and at most, some insignificant vitality will be taken away. If we go out, we will definitely lose our lives." Gong Chang said, "You said this before, and I believed you last time. But does that Rao Jifeng really dare to go against the oath?" Gong Zhao's eyes were cold, and he said, "If he doesn't make a move, it doesn't mean that others won't. Originally, I wanted to go out and surrender to the 9 continents, but it might be them who want our lives. Now that they are covering the sky with one hand, as long as there is a possibility, we can't act rashly. Although they were trapped here, Rao Jifeng didn't hide what was happening outside from them. From his point of view, the two of them would go out sooner or later, and they would know what they should know, so there was no point in hiding it. Gong Chang said in annoyance, "Since you said it, we can't just stay here forever. Think of a way to avoid this disaster." Gong Xiao said, "If we are willing to swear that we will do whatever the 9 continents ask of us, we might be able to keep our bodies intact." Gong Chang, however, chuckled and said, "Another one." If he agreed to this, then he would have to serve others forever. He was one of the 3 high priests of the blue sky realm back then. How could he be willing to be under someone else? Moreover, this was not the most important thing. Once he did such a thing, there would be obstacles in his heart when he wanted to improve his cultivation in the future, and then he would not need to cultivate anymore. Gong Xiao said, "I have been thinking about who will come to make a move on us. Those cultivators of the 9 continents with profound cultivation are either sect leaders or hall masters. They are all people of high status, and they need to stay in their own realm, so they can't keep an eye on us all the time. It is very likely that the ones who will make a move will be the remaining few, and then we might have a chance." Gong Chang said carelessly, "Just say it. As long as we can escape, any method is fine. It's better than wasting our lives here. If the two of us didn't risk our lives to fight back then, how could we be here today?" Gong Xiao said, "Let's do it this way first. When Rao Jifeng comes to ask us when we are going to leave, we have the right to decline. If there are people watching us from outside, they will probably misunderstand that we are unwilling to leave and will relax. At that time, we will leave immediately. It would be easy to escape from this place, but the key is that this person dared to make a move on us along the way, so we must be well prepared, so we can't rely on luck. As long as we leave this realm, one of us will defend with all his might, and the other will find a way to escape." Gong Chang glared and said, "Only one of us can leave? Is there no other way?" Gong Xiao said coldly, "If one is unwilling to surrender and only wants to escape, then this is the only way. Only one of us can leave, but the one who leaves may not be able to survive. It all depends on luck." How could Gong Chang not understand? The void was vast, and even if they left by breaking through the realm, they would not know where they could go, and the outcome might not be good, but it was still better than dying on the spot. He was very straightforward and slapped his knee, saying, "All right, let's do it this way. Then who stays, who guards?" Gong Xiao looked at him and said, "It's hard to say now, let's see how the situation plays out." Chapter 1481. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. In the small kettle world, Bei Xiangtong looked at the direction where the giant dragon was lying and said, "The two of them still haven't come out?" A disciple behind him said respectfully, "I have inquired from Lord Rao's disciple. These two refuse to leave the boundary again and are willing to stay here. Love go, small, say, Neku." Bei Xiangtong gently waved his hand. The disciple bowed and retreated. There was no expression on his face, but he was thinking about how to deal with these two people. Ji Hao had also thought that once one reached a certain level of cultivation, one would be able to sense anything that was related to one's own life and death. Especially since these two had been imprisoned for over 100 years, they should be even more sensitive to such things. Therefore, it was normal for them to hide and not come out. He had used the excuse of exchanging Dao techniques to stay here for many years, but he had to go back in the end. But who knew how long these two were going to hide? Since he couldn't wait for them, he would try to force them out. He gazed into the distance once more before retreating from the cliff. He found a child and asked, "Where is your grandmaster now?" The boy said, "Founder is tasting tea in the Xian bamboo garden." "Does Shangjin have something to discuss with Founder? Do you want me to inform him?" Bei said to the boy, "There's no need, I'll go by myself. You can leave now." Waving the boy away, he rode the cloud and headed towards the south of the island. He flew all the way. The little pot world was filled with a warm breeze, the clear sky and white clouds, the mountains and rivers were painted blue, the lake in the distant sky was the color of smoke, The scenery was extremely beautiful, just looking at it made one feel comfortable. Not long after, he landed in a bamboo forest. There were elks leaping about, but when they saw him, they didn't hide. Instead, they stared at him curiously. Fortunately, he was walking here with a shadow clone. Otherwise, a being with no cultivation like this would not be able to reach him. The reason why the Junshin realm was called the Emperor was because he regarded himself as the supreme ruler, and all other living beings were his subjects. Without permission, no living beings were allowed to get close to him. However, after he merged with the mountain and sea realm, under the influence of Rao and Bei, most of the heavenly regions began to use the terms used by the sects of the 9 continents. Whether it was intentional or not, the original titles were no longer used. At this moment, Rao Jifeng was sitting on a large flat rock, and there was a small table before him. Below him was a small stream that flowed with a gurgling sound, and there were 2 boys brewing tea by his side. They seemed to be in a leisurely and contented state. When he saw the clouds coming over from the sky, he said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, you've arrived. Please take a seat. With such a beautiful scenery, let's enjoy the tea first before discussing anything else." Bei Xiangtong nodded his head in approval and landed in front of him. He raised his cup and took a sip, saying, "The clear water can wash my body, but my heart is not here. How can I taste it?" Rao Jifeng glanced at him and said in surprise, "Fellow Taoist seems to be implying something? There's no harm in being frank. The friendship between our 2 sects cannot be compared to that of others." Bei Xiangtong said bluntly, "Fellow Taoist, what do you think of those 2 from the Gong clan?" Rao Jifeng pondered and said, "Fellow Taoist, are you talking about the matter of me keeping them here? I've thought about it before. They were afraid of being schemed against after leaving. Now that they're waiting here, my sect can borrow their vitality, and it's not against morality, so why wouldn't I do it?" Bei Xiangtong said, "If they don't leave, are they going to stay here forever?" Rao Jifeng smiled and said, "How could that be? For now, their losses are still small in 100 years, but after 1,000 years, they won't be able to hold on. If no one drives them away, they will leave on their own." Bei Xiangtong said, "So that's what fellow Taoist is planning. In my opinion, this is a little inappropriate." Rao Jifeng made an "oh" sound, but he wasn't displeased at all. Instead, he cupped his hands and asked, "Does fellow Taoist have a wise opinion? If it makes sense, I'll definitely listen to it." Bei Xiangtong said, "The 2 Gong clan brothers aren't just the old emperors of Yuliangism. Fellow Taoist, don't forget that they originally came from the mountain and sea realm. Even now, there are still their descendants in that realm, and they possess great power. They are allies of the 9 continents, and they have great potential. If you want to talk about their weakness, it would be that they don't have anyone with a cultivation like the Gong clan brothers." Speaking up to this point, he saw that Rao Jifeng was deep in thought, so he said meaningfully, "If these 2 go back alive, although the 9 continents won't say anything, they will definitely be dissatisfied with us. Since that's the case, why don't we nip it in the bud?" Rao Jifeng said resolutely, "Don't say that I've made an oath, even if I've never made one. I won't make things difficult for them." "Love go little say net chu," Bei Xiangtong said, "Fellow Taoist, you're worrying too much. I don't mean that. I just want you to banish them, and there's no need for them to stay here anymore. If the 9 continents really don't want them to stay, they will naturally take care of them." Rao Jifeng sighed and said, "But what difference does it make if it's earlier or later? Why do you have to rush it now?" Bei Xiangtong said, "Right now, the mountain and sea realm is expanding outwards, trying to find other realms, in order to guard against that almighty being who might come. Fellow Taoist, think about it. Under such circumstances, how can you allow the internal situation to become unstable? Who knows what will happen in 1,000 years? If something really happens, you won't have to worry about it, but you have to think about your disciples, right?" Rao Jifeng frowned. The 9 continents didn't exclude the devil sect, and he could walk openly in the realms. He was very satisfied with this, but if he were to offend the other party because of his insistence, as Bei Xiangtong had said, he wouldn't have any problems, but his disciples would be affected. After pondering for a long time, he finally nodded and sighed, After all, this goes against my conscience. Bei Xiangtong knew what he meant. If cultivators like them did something they didn't want to do, it could affect their cultivation. It was like a beautiful jade with a little flaw. But on the other hand, if they went through this test and wiped away the dust, they would usher in a new transformation. Rao Jifeng said in a low voice, "I will discuss with them again. Next, I will use a magical treasure to absorb their vitality and open the gate of 2 realms. If they can't bear it, they will leave, but I won't drive them away. I hope you can understand." The 2 of them were now bound together for good or bad. If he made the 9 continents unhappy, he would also implicate Bei Xiangtong, so he expressed his apology. Bei Xiangtong said, "That's enough. Fellow Taoist has fulfilled his promise, and you've already protected them once. You've done your best. What happens next has nothing to do with fellow Taoist." Rao Jifeng said, "Perhaps so." He picked up the cup, took another sip and sighed, "It's a little bitter." Rao Jifeng chuckled and also took a sip. He said, "It's bitter at first, then sweet, with a lingering aftertaste. This is a good cup of tea." A few days later, the 2 of them received a contract. It said that according to the previous agreement, the 2 of them could leave. But if they stayed for the sake of the Jade Pot Small World's safety, they would have to sacrifice more vitality, and if necessary, they would have to help Rao Jifeng and his disciples forge magical treasures. Gong Xiao said, "Rao Jifeng is driving us away. There must be someone behind him pushing him to do this. Originally, I planned to wait for the enemy to lower their guard before leaving, but now it seems that I can't." Gong Chang said, "Can't we wait a little longer?" Gong Xiao said, "We can't wait any longer. If we don't sign this contract, then Rao Jifeng can openly drive us away. But if we sign it, he will have to absorb a large amount of vitality from us. In less than 100 years, our vitality will be greatly damaged, and we will lose the power to resist. At that time, we can only wait to be slaughtered." Gong Chang pondered, "Then we can only leave? If we are forced to leave like this, we won't have a good ending." Gong Xiao said, "There is another way. It seems that Rao Jifeng isn't willing to do anything to us. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to resort to such tricks. We can negotiate with him. Who knows, we might leave within 100 years. I believe he will agree to it." Gong Chang touched his chin and said, "Within 100 years, which means to find an opportunity to leave within this period of time?" Gong Xiao said, "That's right. We need to make preparations. When the time comes, we will leave." Rao Jifeng quickly learned of the request of the 2 of them. In all fairness, the condition was not excessive. He thought it over and felt that the condition of leaving within 100 years was acceptable, so he agreed and sent someone to inform Bei Xiangtong of the matter. After Bei Xiangtong learned about it, he smiled faintly and said, "It's just a last-ditch struggle." The 2 of them could not cultivate for 100 years and could only have their vitality extracted by others. Although their strength did not deteriorate by much, all the instruments on them were confiscated. Rao Jifeng was not a person who purely kept his promise and did not know how to be flexible. He was also worried that the 2 of them would bear a grudge and seek revenge in the future, which would make him look foolish. Therefore, he was not prepared to return any of the items to them. In this way, the combat strength of the 2 was far from what it used to be, almost not even half of what it was at its peak. However, Bei Xiangtong was different. In order to deal with the 2 of his peers, he had made ample preparations for 100 years. The things that were passed down from Yuliangism, other than the part taken by Jojo, were all in his possession. It could be said that even if the 2 of them were to wield a magic weapon, he had the same confidence to take it down. After waiting patiently for more than 10 years, 2 rays of light suddenly disappeared from the realm. He raised his head and looked in one direction, his eyes revealing a sneer. After the 2 Gong brothers secretly left the small kettle world, they did not split up. In the past, they could do so, but now that their strength was greatly reduced, this was only an opportunity for others to attack them separately. Half a month after they left, they suddenly saw a ray of clear light flying over, blocking their way. Then, a Taoist walked out from it, bowed and said, "Fellow Taoists, why are you in such a hurry? Where are you going?" Gong Chang's eyes sharpened. He circulated his mana, his body overflowing with chi and blood. His whole person looked like a red sun, rushing towards the formation ahead. Even the void seemed to have turned into a patch of blood red. He transmitted a message. Old Shao, do as I said earlier. I will stop him, and don't forget to avenge me. As he spoke, he had already rushed up, appearing very decisive. Gong Shao did not hesitate. At this time, a slight delay could cause him to miss the opportunity. He immediately activated the chi on his body, and at the same time, activated the root fruit, trying to break open the door of 2 realms and fly away. Bei Xiangdong, on the other hand, was very confident. He had planned for such a long time, and all the reactions of the two were within his consideration. There would not be any mistakes. First, he took out a magic weapon to protect himself, then with a flick of his sleeve, a formation map flew out and came above Gong Shao in an instant. The door of 2 realms that was about to open was instantly stabilized. Chapter 1482. Genius 1 second. Remember love? Go. Talk net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. What Bei Xiangtong had been paying the most attention to was how to prevent the 2 imperial emperors of the Gong clan from breaking into other realms, and this formation map was prepared for them. Back then, Kong Ying made it for the imperial emperors of the inner realms, but he never used it. They had no power and could not hurt the enemy, but they could disturb the flow of energy and lock down the space above you. Once you were above your head, you would not be able to get out in a short time. The only thing he had to be careful of was that the 2 of them would split up as soon as they got out of the Jade Pot small world. If that happened, he would have to stop them in advance, but that would make Rao Jifeng lose face. Fortunately, that didn't happen. In fact, this was reasonable because the 2 Gong brothers could not have known that he was the only one coming, so they would not have dared to split up. Gong Chang came up and passed through Bei Xiangtong's body like a shadow. He knew that Bei Xiangtong had sacrificed his root fruit to escape, so he immediately began to calculate. However, neither he nor Gong Shao were Qi Dao cultivators, so being able to calculate the location of other people's root fruits was their weakness. Their strong point was that they could compete with others in terms of energy consumption, but the prerequisite was that they had powerful magical treasures and protective treasures. Now that they had neither of these, it was very dangerous. Over the years, Bei Xiangtong had carefully studied the fighting style of the 2 Gong brothers. Usually, when they encountered an equal opponent, the 2 of them would fight together. Usually, Gong Chang would fight head-on, while Gong Shao would look for opportunities outside. It had always been like this, and it had never changed for thousands of years. It was not that they did not want to change their fighting style, but that this way of fighting was the best for each person, and also the most difficult to deal with. Between the 2 of them, Gong Zhao's escape technique was better than Gong Chang's, so as long as he kept a close eye on the former, he would be able to keep the 2 of them here. Gong Chang and Gong Shao saw that they were about to leave, but they did not give up. They were going to deal with Bei Xiangtong and see if they could find an opportunity to escape. On the other side of the battlefield, before the 3 of them could make their move, Rao Jifeng received an imperial order from the Mountain and Sea Realm, requesting that he go to the Mountain and Sea Realm. Based on his calculations, it wasn't too long until the time to hand over the tribute, and to avoid having to travel back and forth, he decided to take it with him. He bid farewell to Bei Xiangtong's avatar in the inner realm and left with peace of mind. The battle between 3 third-step cultivators should have been earth-shattering, but Bei Xiangtong had done his homework. He chose to intercept them in the void so that the 2 from the Gong family wouldn't have a chance to kidnap the cultivators of the Junshan realm. He also used a treasure to hide the movement, so no one in the inner realm noticed the change here. The 3 of them fought fiercely in the void sky. Unknowingly, 2 years had passed. Bei Xiangtong was still calm and composed. He had the absolute advantage and was as steady as he could be. He used his instrument to block the ordinary attacks and his root fruit to evade the powerful attacks. Because he knew the origins of the 2 and their skills, he was not afraid that they would be able to calculate the location of his root fruit. If this went on, he would be able to exhaust them to death. He did not immediately take out a powerful move because he had his considerations. He was afraid that the 2 of them still had some powerful killing moves, so he did not want to push them too far. Once the two of them exhausted a bit more of their essence chi, he would not have the chance to make a move even if he wanted to. How could the two from the Gong family not see through such a setup? It was like there was a big net around them, and as the battle went on, the net gradually tightened. It was not that they did not want to break out of the net, but their opponent was too steady, and they could not find any chance. After another year of fighting, Gong Chang could not bear it anymore. He knew very well that after using the root fruit frequently, Bei Xiangtong would be able to find his root fruit in at most a month or so. Since that was the case, he might as well fight while he still had essence chi. He transmitted his voice, "Old Shao, looks like we can't escape. I don't care what you do, I'm not used to listening to orders." With that, regardless of Gong Chang's reaction, he let out a roar, and the red rainbow on his body became dozens of times hotter than before. Then, it shrouded everything in front of him. Bei Xiangtong's spirit was slightly lifted, and he also raised his vigilance. He understood that the opponent was ready to fight with his life. Looking at the boundless red light, he immediately knew that such a pure magic power attack could not be resisted by the magic treasure. However, he had the protection of the root fruit, so what if the scene looked good? But the next moment, he found that no matter where he went, the light always lingered, and his senses were also blocked, so he did not know what the situation outside was. This made him a little surprised, but after a little calculation he immediately understood that he could get rid of it in 10 breaths' time, and during this time, Gong Shao could not escape far at all. But if the opponent used this method right from the start, and the other person tried to break the boundary and fly, there might be a possibility of success. This person did not do so, which meant that he did not have the intention to die at that time, otherwise, the ending would be different. After Gong Chang used this magical power, his whole body's essence chi was exhausted. He turned his head and saw that Gong Shao did not move, and he could not help but grin. This expression appeared just now, and his whole body turned into ashes, and at the place where he died, a black hole suddenly appeared, and then everything turned into nothingness. Bei Xiangtong waited for the red light to disperse, looked up, and saw that Gong Shao did not leave. He was slightly surprised and said, "Just now is such a good opportunity, why don't you leave?" Gong Shao said calmly, "I can't leave." Bei Xiangtong said, "You are very clear." He circulated his mana and was about to make a move again, but at this time, Gong Shao suddenly looked up and said, "Wait, what if I surrender?" Bei Xiangtong's movement moved slightly, looked at him, and sighed. "If you were willing to submit earlier, there would still be a chance of survival, but now that I have already made my move, how can I stop? There must be an end to today's matter." Once he made his move, there would be enmity between the two sides. Even if Gong Shao surrendered, he would only submit to the 9 regions and not to him. If this person could live safely this time, he was sure that in the future he would definitely cause trouble for himself, and if he was unlucky he might be killed by it, so there was no room for negotiation. Gong Shao was silent for a moment, and then said, "What a pity." Bei Xiangtong did not know what he was feeling pity for. Was he sighing at Gong Chang's indecisiveness just now, or was he lamenting himself? But there was no need for him to find out. Today, these two must die here, so he did not say anything more. He made a hand sign, and a huge spiritual tide surged out from the void, charging towards the other party. The two from the Gong clan were not Bei Xiangtong's match even if they worked together, and now, Gong Shao alone was even worse. 20 days later, as Xiao Zhenguo was found, he could no longer defend against the oncoming attacks, and his body was repeatedly pierced by the spiritual rainbows. After another 10 days, his vitality was finally exhausted, and he died. At this moment, not far from Void Sky, there was an undetectable clump of sea serpent gas floating, and Xue Dingyuan was standing inside, watching the changes of the battle silently. He had also left spies in Junqian realm, and this time, it was to prevent any accidents from happening in this battle. Because his movements were secretive, even Bei Xiangtong did not know that he was here. Seeing that the two from the Gong clan were dead, there was no need for him to stay any longer, and with a wave of his sleeve, he turned and left. The sun and moon were like jumping balls, and the wheel of time was like flying. 50 years passed in a hurry. In Xianyuan's small world, Zhang Yan's mana gradually accumulated to the peak of this realm, and because there was no longer the danger of Purple Clear's spiritual opportunity being cut off, he calculated that in another 20 to 30 years, he could attempt to cut off his past body and leap into the second stage realm. At that stage, his strength would increase greatly, and it was impossible to enter the third stage realm in a short period of time, but at that time, he could go to outer space to search for the strength path root fruit. The void world was extremely unstable, and he might encounter some unknown great enemy, and to deal with these dangers, he had to rely on his own strength. At this moment, there was a flash of spiritual light, and Mountain River Child appeared from the sky, standing there with his body bowed. Zhang Yan asked, "Is there anything outside?" Mountain River Child bowed to him and said, "Master, just now Jing Langjun came to report that a white-feathered demon bird called West Fuzi came from the Earth Star outside the land, and said that Master directed her to come here, and she wants to see Master." Zhang Yan nodded. "It was me who called her here, asked Jing Yu to bring this demon to the main hall." Mountain River Child said yes, bowed and retreated. Zhang Yan, on the other hand, changed his mind, and a doppelganger left the small world and went outside. West Fuzi returned to the Earth Star, and along the way, she saw the solemn and grand atmosphere of Qinsong School, which was an eye-opener, and at the same time, she was shocked beyond words, especially when the spiritual opportunity flourished here, and it was unknown how many times more than the original Earth Star. If it was not for the concern of her tribe, she even wanted to stay here and not leave. Jing Yu came out under Zhang Yan's order, and he led her to the main hall. As soon as she entered, she saw Zhang Yan sitting on the high platform, and she quickly bowed. "Greetings, Celestial Master." Zhang Yan smiled. "Rise, you really came. This time, did you come alone, or did you bring your tribesmen?" West Fuzi replied in a low voice, reporting to Celestial Master, "This time, I brought 10 of my tribesmen here to let them see the outside world, and if they do not follow the rules, I will send them back." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "There's no need for that. You can wander around the mountains, seas, and Earth's continents for a few days before deciding if you want to stay or not. However, you have to be careful of those places with fierce demons." He flicked his finger, and a spiritual light fell. "I will give you a travel talisman, and you can use it to travel between the array gates." West Fuzi took the spiritual light and said gratefully, "Thank you, Celestial Master." Jing Yu walked up and chuckled, "Chief West Fuzi, please follow this little one. I will arrange a place for you and your tribesmen to stay." West Fuzi hurriedly thanked him and followed him down the stairs. Zhang Yan watched them leave, but his magic power clone did not go back, and he stayed in the main hall. With a wave of his hand, he took out the cultivation technique jade booklet that Junchen Realm had offered over the years and flipped it open. A month passed in the blink of an eye, and on this day, the 2 realms dial that had not moved for a long time on the table suddenly trembled. He raised his eyebrows, put down the jade booklet, and pressed his hand on it. Immediately, a spiritual light shot out, and a gloomy Taoist appeared. He said, "Taoist Sima, do you have something to report?" Sima Quan bowed to him, and his expression was very solemn as he said, "Taoist, there is a huge change in Jiaohua realm." Chapter 1483. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? TalkNet, providing you with exciting novels to read. Sima Quan being so serious, Zhang Yan also realized that the problem this time was probably not small. He asked slowly, "Enlightened Sima, what happened in the Hornflower realm?" Sima Quan said, "Previously, Sima reported to the realm that the Hornflower upper realm, Yunshu realm, was invaded by evil monsters. Previously, I deliberately leaked this information. It was to find a friendly alliance and fight the great enemy together." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "I already know about this matter. It seems that this matter has something to do with these evil monsters?" Sima Quan said, "Yes, evil monsters have invaded. The Yunshu realm is said to have dozens of lower realms, but in just a few years, more than 10 realms have fallen, and the Hornflower realm is one of them. Moreover, the Shangjin of the Yunshu realm have been hiding the news. If I didn't leave a clone in the Hornflower realm when I came, I'm afraid it would be difficult for me to know about this. At this point, his voice became slightly heavy. Those evil monsters are more difficult to deal with than imagined, and Sima even saw a demon. Zhang Yan's eyes slightly narrowed. As expected, this matter was not small. Since there were demons, it was very likely that there would be existences like the Heavenly Demon and the Genin Demon. Among the various sects in the 9 continents, he had the most contact with the Heavenly Demon. People like Sima Quan maintained their own temperament. Moreover, he was first an elder of the Netherworld Spring sect, then a Heavenly Demon. In essence, he was still a Taoist cultivator. It was just that the cultivation method he chose was different from his peers. However, those demons that were born from the turbid air were different. Even if they possessed the body of a Taoist cultivator and obtained their experience and wisdom, they would never become like a human. Instead, they would become more dangerous. All good and evil, morality, and ethics were meaningless to them. Instead, they were tools that could be used. Sima Quan still had some restraint in his actions. Moreover, other people's wisdom and experience were poison to him. Other than the necessary parts, he rarely took the initiative to ask for it. However, pure heavenly demons did not have such scruples. If they wanted to, they could overturn a large sect with a heavenly abode in an extremely short time, not to mention there was an existence like the Genin Demon. Zhang Yan thought about it and asked, "What's the situation like now?" Sima Quan said, "Facing those evil monsters, the Yunshu realm's cultivators retreated step by step, and it was almost impossible for them to put up an effective resistance. It was even rumored that a Shangjin with mortal metamorphosis cultivation had died in battle." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows and said, "Did Taoist Sima inquire about this himself, or did he hear it from someone else?" Sima Quan said, "I heard it from someone else. However, after asking around, I feel that this matter is very likely to be true." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly as he said, "If it's not a rumor, or cultivator Yunshu accidentally leaked it, then it must be these evil spirits. They can be said to have a deep understanding of people's hearts. However, to use such a method to shake the Yunshu realm, it means that the situation is not as dangerous as it looks." Sima Quan thought for a while and said in a deep voice, "Taoist Sima is saying that although the Yunshu realm is in a precarious situation this time, it's very likely that part of it is faked for us to see?" Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "It's very likely. According to the news that Taoist Sima sent earlier, the battle between the people of the Yunshu realm and the evil spirits has not been going on for a day or two. They must have a certain method to deal with it. Previously, they deliberately leaked it because they found out that there were people from the outside world here. Maybe they found out about Taoist masters' whereabouts, or maybe there are other people besides our 9 continents there. They must want to find allies to join forces against the enemy. This time, the situation is even more dangerous, so I'm afraid this idea is even more urgent." Sima Quan said, "However, if a mortal metamorphosis cultivator was really killed, then I'm afraid the loss will not be light." Zhang Yan said, "Do you know the specific details?" Sima Quan said, "It's hard to know the details. I can only speculate based on some scattered clues. This person seemed to be looking for an opportunity to kill a big evil spirit, but didn't realize it was a trap. Later, he fell into a siege and died of exhaustion." Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "A mortal metamorphosis cultivator is very difficult to kill and can't be defeated in a short time. From the looks of it, he should be fighting with the enemy in his own realm, so his fellow Taoists will not sit by and do nothing. In my opinion, the one that was lost should be a more important clone. But in this case, it can be said to be a big loss, but it's not fatal." After a pause, he asked again, "About those evil spirits, does Taoist Sima know anything?" Sima Quan replied, "That clone of mine was swallowed by a demon. But when I took a quick glance, I saw something that looked like a swanee and heard a few words. These evil spirits live by devouring spiritual opportunity, and even the flesh and blood of Taoists are their favorite. Some of them are not afraid of supernatural powers and spells, so they are extremely difficult to deal with. But whether or not it is the same as the rumors, we still need to investigate." Zhang Yan said, "I will explain this matter to everyone." Taoist Sima, continue to pay attention to the inner realm, and I will contact you when I have results. Sima Quan bowed and said, Sima understands. Zhang Yan withdrew his mana, and the spiritual light on the dual realm dial faded again. His body gradually disappeared, and the mana clone returned to his original body. When he came out of his meditation, he exited the small world and headed towards the main hall of the floating heavenly palace. He went to the door and reported his arrival. When a servant came to summon him, he entered the main hall. Seeing that sect leader Qin was already seated in the main hall, he went forward and greeted him. After exchanging a few words of greeting, he sat down at the banquet table and told sect leader Qin the news that Sima Quan had sent. The two of them discussed for a while, then sect leader Qin said, this matter should be discussed with everyone. Then he summoned the other mortal metamorphosis cultivators. Zhang Yan also released his divine will, and in a flash he arrived in the unknown space. Sect leader Qin and Meng Zhen arrived together, and after a while, Yu Xianxiao, Ying Chuanqiu, and Xue Dingyuan also appeared one after another. After everyone had greeted each other, Zhang Yan repeated what he had just told Sect Master Qin and said, there are two main things. One is that the Yunshu realm occupies a lot of space, and one of them is the Jiaohua realm that I want to take back. Now this realm is in the hands of those evil monsters. The second thing is that the people of the Yunshu realm seem to have the intention to find allies to fight against the evil monsters together. Previously, it had nothing to do with us, but now it has something to do with us. Whether we should intervene or not, we still need to discuss it. Hearing this, everyone began to ponder. They could all see that when they wanted to take back the Jiahua realm, there would be conflict with the Yunshu realm. However, now that it was invaded by the evil monsters, the situation had changed, especially when they urgently needed help. If they asked to take back the realm, then there was a high chance they could take it back. They could even try to propose some other conditions. Of course, the premise was that these evil monsters could be dealt with and they couldn't be trapped. Meng Zhen bowed to sect leader Qin and then said, looking at it now, it does seem to be an opportunity. However, in the past, we planned to wait until I became stronger before plotting. Right now, less than 200 years have passed, and our strength hasn't grown much. If we intervene now, I'm afraid it's not appropriate. Most of the enlightened beings present agreed. Before doing anything, one must first consider one's own ability. This was especially true when it involved the disciples of the various sects and the billions of lives in the inner realm. Of course, they had to be cautious. Xue Dingyuan said, even if the people of the Yunshu realm can't hold on and the Jiahua realm is lost, when I become strong in the future, I can take it back. Yu Xianxiao didn't like the way the people of the Yunshu realm acted. If they wanted to ask for help, then they should openly say it. Now that they were being secretive and hesitant, it was very pretentious. However, he still had the intention to advance. He raised his voice and said, although this matter has nothing to do with me, who can guarantee a certain level of peace among the realms? These evil monsters have found their way to the Yunshu realm now, and they might come to the mountain and sea realm in the future. We have to find out who they are. If we can't defeat them, then we'll wait and see. If we can deal with them, then we'll use our swords to kill them. Zhang Yan said, whether we fight or not, we have to find out who they are. It's not convenient for us to send people, so it seems that this matter will fall on enlightened being Sima. He turned to sect leader Qin and said, disciples suggest that although we can't meet them, if necessary, we can ask enlightened being Sima to reveal our existence to them. This will strengthen their morale and make it easier to negotiate in the future. Sect leader Qin said, Hall Master Du Zhen, this is a good idea. Everyone discussed for a while more. They all felt that it was necessary to find out how long the people of the Yunshu realm could last and how the strength of the two sides was. This was related to what they would do in the future. Zhang Yan said, if we look at the big picture, the Yunshu realm can divide the spiritual opportunity and take a lot of the spiritual opportunity from the lower realms to fill their own realm, making it prosperous for a while. But on the other hand, without the many lower realms, this good situation can't be maintained. The small realms that were lost before should be unimportant. Perhaps there will be some damage, but it won't be too difficult. If those evil monsters stop here, then the situation will be balanced. If they lose all the lower realms, then it will be a real crisis. In fact, no matter what, as long as the mortal molten cultivators were still there, the Yunshu realm could still hold on for a long time. Especially if their own realm was not lost, their foundation was still there, and they were still far from being at the end of the line. After a long discussion, they decided to observe the situation for a while and wait for the situation to change before discussing further. After a few more words, they all withdrew. Just as Zhang Yan was about to leave, he saw Xue Dingyuan nod his head to him. He pondered for a moment and decided to stay. After everyone left, Xue Dingyuan bowed to him and said, "I heard Shinren Zhang said that there are extraterrestrial demons among those evil monsters. I suddenly remembered something. In the abyss, some strange things have been found in recent years. They can mix with the demons, and sometimes they can even order the demons to do things. I was thinking, could those evil monsters be similar to them?" Zhang Yan's heart moved and he said seriously, "Where are these things?" Xue Dingyuan shook his head and said, "These things are weak and few in number. So far, I have only seen about 10 of them and their lifespans are short. It's only a cycle of spring and autumn, so I didn't pay much attention to them. If we search carefully in the depths of the abyss, we might be able to find them." Zhang Yan pondered. There were evil monsters in the Yunshu realm, and there were also strange things here. It would be fine if the two were not related, but if they were, then it would be very troublesome. He said, "Those that can be related to the demons should not be underestimated. Leader Xue, when is it convenient, I will personally go to the abyss to investigate." Chapter 1484. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. After Zhang Yan made his decision, he came to the abyss a few days later. He had to figure things out as soon as possible. Now that the formation gates between the sects had been completely built, it only took him about 2 hours to cross thousands of mountains and rivers and arrive in front of the pure Yin barrier. Xue Dingyuan was already waiting in front of the gate. After greeting each other outside, he brought him to the abyss. Although this place was underground, the entrance to the abyss was surrounded by a huge ring of stones after the great efforts of the 6 sections. These jade stones were inlaid with talisman spells. Each of them was refined by the Yuanying elders and finally refined by the people of the Dongtian. If a demon came out, it would immediately be discovered by the supervisor. At that time, the people of the Dongtian would come out to capture it with a magic tool and bring it back to be refined. In the sky above the abyss, Xue Dingyuan and the people of the 6 sects of the Dongtian had refined a floating canopy. This thing constantly rotated and shrouded the top. The inside was directly connected to the mirage of illusion. If a demon came out from this place, it would bump into the inside. If the Gen-in demon went inside, it would be like walking into a trap. Even if the Gen-in demon went inside, it wouldn't be able to get out in a short time. By then, Xue Dingyuan would have already arrived. Zhang Yan looked down and said, "This place is well arranged. I can see that you've put a lot of effort into it." Xue Dingyuan said, "It's not too much to be on guard against the demon. It's just that we don't have enough precious materials and manpower. Moreover, once the demon has intelligence, it will also find flaws and loopholes. We can stop it for now, but it may not be possible in the future. Therefore, this is only the first barrier. In the future, we need to build 8 more. When the 9 barriers are closed, no matter how cunning he is, he won't be able to come out." Zhang Yan nodded. Back in the 9 continents, the spiritual sect had fought with the demon and was very experienced. It was indeed the right decision to let the spiritual sect be the abode of the earth abyss. He said, "Sect Master Xue, what else is lacking here? I will go back and have a discussion with sect leader Reverend to allocate some precious materials for your use first." Regardless of whether it was the mountain and sea realm or the Junchen realm, offerings would be sent over every few days. The Qinsong sect and the Shaoqing sect each had 2 reverend mortal metamorphoses, and their sects were the most powerful. Naturally, they had the most treasures, but there were some that they didn't need at the moment, so they could give them to the 6 sects. Xue Dingyuan cupped his hands and said, Then I shall thank you on behalf of the 6 sect's disciples, Taoist Zhang. These treasures and materials will be borrowed by our 6 sects, and we will return them to your sect when the time comes. Zhang Yan laughed. There's no need to rush things. I'm afraid the mountain and sea realm is going to run into some powerful enemies. We need to focus on improving our cultivation base first. We can discuss other matters later. Shui Dingyuan agreed and said, because of the restrictive spell, we will have to walk for some distance. Reverend, please follow me. He led the way and descended from the sky. Before long, they landed in the middle of the pass. Zhang Yan stood there and looked around. The ground was paved with Xian jade crystals, and the night epiphyllum floated above. The walls were inlaid with clear pearls, and spiritual light flickered everywhere. When it was bright, it was like a clear mirror, and when it was dark, it was like a reflection of the void. Ignoring the dangers of the place, it was a magnificent sight. The two of them walked along the stone path, and after walking for about half a kilometer, they arrived at the mouth of the abyss. There was a jade staircase leading down into the depths of the abyss. At this point, Shui Dingyuan sent out a beam of spiritual light, and before long, a beam of light shot down from below. It was an old man with skin like iron, a broad chin, and a long beard. He cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, sect leader Shui." "Greetings, Zhang Shangzhen." Shui Dingyuan pointed at the man and said, "Reverend Zhang, this is Elder Zhen. He's in charge of everything here, and he's seen those strange things a few times." Then he turned to Zhang Shangzhen and said, "Elder Zhen, please explain in detail to Reverend Zhang." Zhen Zhangdaoren responded with a yes. He pondered for a moment before saying, "That thing first appeared 5 years ago. Another elder and I borrowed the heavenly karma pillar to patrol the 30th floor, and we saw an eyeball-like thing with tentacles on its body. It was mixed with several devils. The strange thing was, when the devils see living beings, they would either fight to bite or possess them, but this thing was alive and well, and it would even drive the devils to devour its own kind. I tried to attack it once or twice, but who knew that this thing was so fragile, and with just one divine art, it disappeared without a trace. After that, I ran into it a few times, and I tried to capture it, but not once did I succeed. Every time I caught it, it disappeared on its own." After listening, Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, "Elder Zhen, take me to the boundaries where I saw those strange things." Zhen Zhangdaoren said, "Yes, Reverend Zhang. Sect leader Shui, please come this way." The heavenly karma pillar was needed to go up and down the earth abyss, so the three of them headed in that direction. At this moment, Shui Dingyuan said, "Speaking of the heavenly karma pillar, I returned to the bottom to check on the demon's movements and unexpectedly found that the pillar is still growing. However, it has only grown a little over the years. I suspect that after it grows a little, there might be another layer at the bottom." As a mortal metamorphosis cultivator of the spirit gate, he was responsible for suppressing the devils. He had come down to take a look, and after a few visits, he discovered that something was amiss. Zhang Yan said with a smile, "This shows that the mountain and sea realm is like the birth of man, still thriving and flourishing. It's still a long way from decline. It's just like the 9 continents, which were already in decline. If we hadn't left then, the disciples of the later generations would have fallen along with us." Shui Dingyuan said with a sigh, "If the Spirit Gate and Yuxiao had stood together at that time, it would have been difficult to see the scenery beyond the heavens." Zhang Yan said, "That day, Master Lingya said that the heavens beyond the heavens might not be stable. It's true that it's not stable and there are dangers everywhere. It's difficult to move forward. However, if we cultivators are afraid of such obstacles, how can we even cultivate? Let's not talk about this. If the patriarchs of the various sects had this view, they wouldn't have come to the 9 continents to pass down their teachings." Shui Dingyuan was in deep thought. As they spoke, the 3 of them arrived in front of the heavenly karma pillar. Shui Dingyuan pointed and poured magic power into it. In an instant, the pillar shone brightly, and they walked inside. When they reappeared, they were on the 30th layer. When Elder Zhen came out, he saw that his aura was a little unstable. He quickly apologized and sat down to adjust his breathing. This was not only because of the heavenly karma pillar's influence, but also because he was traveling with two mortal cultivators. Even though he had the protection of the talisman that Xue Dingyuan had given him beforehand, he still couldn't withstand it. Zhang Yan didn't rush him. He talked to Xue Dingyuan. "Sect Master Xue, how many layers have you set up in the abyss?" Xue Dingyuan said, "The lower 60 layers are under our control. It's not that we can't go further, but it's close to the turbid Sea of Qi, and there are many demons there. Unless the sect's grotto heaven is willing to stand guard there at all times, it'll be difficult to resist. If there's a Gen-in demon coming up, I'll have to deal with it myself. However, it's been relatively stable these years, and there haven't been any abnormalities." In reality, this situation had something to do with Zhang Yan. He had captured more than one Gen-in demon twice before. These demons also knew how powerful they were, so they didn't dare to go near the heavenly karma pillar, let alone go up. After a while, Elder Zhen's aura finally calmed down. He stood up and said apologetically, "I've made Sect Master Xue and Zhang Shangzhen wait for a long time. This way please." Without further delay, he immediately leaped forward. Zhang Yan and Xue Dingyuan followed behind him. An hour later, they stopped at an underground. Colonel Zhang Yan pointed and said, "I was patrolling here and was about to return when I saw that thing wandering around here." Zhang Yan walked over and looked around. He didn't see any strange monsters. Then he noticed a cave in the distance and asked, "Where is that?" Elder Zhendauren said, "The last time I was here, there was nothing inside." Zhang Yangong focused his eyes and immediately looked through the inside and outside of the cave. However, when he looked at the shape of the cave, he felt that it was somewhat familiar. After pondering for a moment, he already knew where he came from. He said, "Let's go to the next place." Elder Zhen nodded. Then, he brought the two of them to a few more territories. It only took them a day to complete the journey. After looking at it, Zhang Yan had a rough idea of what was going on. Xue Dingyuan asked, "Did you find anything, Master Zhang?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I have a rough idea, but it's hard to make a judgment before seeing such a thing. In order to verify it, I'll need to walk around. Sect Master Xue, you don't have to keep me company." Xue Dingyuan said, "Since that's the case, I'll take my leave. If you need anything, just let me know." He cupped his hands together and left with Elder Zhen. Zhang Yan, on the other hand, soared into the sky and surveyed the surrounding terrain. This time, he discovered that all the places that had seen this strange thing had one thing in common. That was, there had to be a cave dug out by the Teng clan or a nest that they had once lived in. Speaking of the Teng people, they were the aborigines of the Earth Abyss. They lived here because they were born with an eye that could restrain demons. Later, the clan was destroyed by the Genin demon and its eye was dug out. Since then, the clan was completely wiped out. Due to the effect of the eye, he tried to search for it after learning about it, but to no avail. Now, he suspected that the eye was related to the Ting people's eye. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared in the boundaries where the clan used to live, and it just so happened to be able to capture the demon. There couldn't be such a coincidence in the world. Taking a step back, even if it wasn't, there must be some connection between the two. Hence, he came down to search for it. He only needed to go to these places. As for how to find it, it was easy. The Teng people were living creatures, so they must have their habits and characteristics. Most of their caves were near the rivers that existed in the Earth Abyss since ancient times. This was the most obvious direction. After he finished looking, he released dozens of flying swords to search around. He didn't find anything in the first few days, but after searching for nearly a month and walking up and down several floors, he finally found something. He saw an eyeball the size of a millstone floating in the air, surrounded by seemingly illusory tentacles. It didn't move very fast. Because he knew that this thing was fragile, he did not rashly grab it, but observed from behind. He found that it was very similar to the Teng people's eye, except that it was slightly bigger. However, it had lived for many years and became a living creature, so there must be some changes. After sensing it again, he could already confirm that this eye had nothing to do with the evil spirit. It should be the Teng people's eye that was born from the spiritual opportunity. However, whether it could restrain the demon remained to be verified. If it still existed, he could try to capture it, and after the sacrificial refining, he could give it to his disciples. Maybe in the future, they could use it to fight against the sky demon. However, under the influence of the demon, they tore at each other, and after half an hour, all of them died from severe injuries. The eye demon slowly moved to the front of the demon's corpse, and then began to eat heartily. After eating, it could be seen that its body had grown at a speed visible to the naked eye. Its originally pale eyes were now bloodshot, and it looked especially ferocious. Although it looked terrifying in reality, it was still very fragile. Without the devil, any low-level cultivator could easily kill it. For the next month, Zhang Yan kept feeding it flesh and blood. Every 10 days, the demon would transform. In the end, its body became smaller, but its tentacles were longer and denser. It could summon no less than 100 demons. Seeing this, he felt that it was time to bring this demon out. With a thought, a bolt of lightning shot out and scattered the demons. Then, he took out a funnel-shaped Dharma artifact. He shone it in the air and took the eye demon inside. He hit a few more talisman on it and it became smaller and smaller. Finally, it fell into his palm. It was soaked with the essence blood of a fierce demon, enough for the demon to last for 3 to 5 years. When that time came, he would take it out. If it could withstand external energy, then it would be fine. If it still couldn't, then he would leave it for a few more years, and with the help of magic power, it would be fine. If it had the effect of restraining the demons after refining, then he could catch a few more. However, he didn't need to do this anymore. He could just go back and tell one of his disciples to take care of it. After keeping the Dharma artifact, he came back to the abyss with the help of the heavenly karma pillar. He bid farewell to Shui Dingyuan and left the turbid Yin barrier. He went through the formation door and returned to the Dragon Abyss Sea Marsh. When he sat down in his cave, he summoned Jingyu and gave him the Dharma artifact. After giving him some instructions, he entered the Xianyuan small world and continued to meditate. In the blink of an eye, another 50 years had passed. Zhang Yan was sitting and observing. He felt that his divine qi was lively and eager to move. He knew that the time was right and the time to enter the next gate was right in front of him. He let go of everything and let the qi in his body surge. After a long time, he suddenly heard a loud sound, as if the heavens and earth were being split apart. With the help of this, his divine will extended outwards and smoothly entered the second stage realm. At this moment, he saw all his past experiences and all the people and things that he had come into contact with along the way. In his eyes, these were all incomparably obvious marks. Humans born between heaven and earth were bound to be related to all things in the world. Although he entered the mortal realm and became a heaven on his own, it was like walking on the beach. There would always be traces left behind. If there was an enemy who was in the second gate or a cultivator who had cultivated above the second gate, it would not be difficult for them to see these traces. In the end, they might even know him better than he did. Now that he knew the flaws, he would not leave them behind. He immediately swept his divine qi and wiped them clean. Thus, the traces of him entering the world were completely erased. From now on, what was left were only memories in people's hearts. The real past only existed in one's own cognition. This meant that anyone who wanted to use supernatural means to find out where he came from would only get a plausible answer in the end. Or it would just be a cloud of fog. After everything was done, Zhang Yan felt his body lighten, as if he had been freed from some kind of shackles. He could see that although his past was constantly increasing, it was constantly moving away from him under the extension of the divine will. This process was just like flowing water, without any interruption. Therefore, people who were not on the same level as him could not hurt him at all. This was because the other party was always looking at the me in the past, and not the me in the present. After entering the second realm, it was like entering mortal shedding. Although there were no signs of grandeur in the outside world, there was an earth-shattering change on the inside. And because he was using both qi and strength at the same time, his true combat ability was not comparable to that of ordinary second-realm cultivators. It could be said that his combat ability had greatly improved. After carefully observing the changes in his body, he slowly retracted his cultivation. He thought to himself, now that my cultivation is enough to protect myself, if there is nothing in the outside world, I should find a time to go beyond the heavens to find the root fruit of the strength path. In the Yunshu realm, above the sky of the azure world, 4 upper mortal shedding cultivators were discussing how to defend against evil spirits. The head of the virtuous perching water pavilion, Yin Liang, looked exhausted. With his cultivation, it was impossible for something like this to happen. This could only be due to the extreme exhaustion of his qi. The other 3 looked at him with sympathy. The latter used more than 1,000 years to cultivate a primordial doppelganger. Its mana was almost equal to his own. Ever since he had this ability, he even had more confidence in speaking. He did not expect that he would be destroyed by the evil spirits because of a moment of carelessness. The head of the Great Might Heavenly Palace, Ming Xianling, asked with concern, "Are you all right, fellow Taoist?" After Yin Liang was injured, he had been in seclusion to recuperate. Just now he came out. He said with a solemn face, "My primordial essence is heavily damaged. I'm afraid I can't fight for now. If I don't rest for 1,000 years, it will be difficult for me to recover my qi." The 3 frowned. This was a crucial time in the battle against the evil spirits. They were already weak, and without a mortal shedding cultivator to hold the fort, the power they could mobilize was even more limited. Ming Xianling said, "Previously, when your doppelganger was damaged, you immediately went into seclusion. We did not even know the specific details, so I did not dare to make any big moves in these years. Now that we have gathered, I wonder if it is convenient for you to tell us the reason?" Yin Liang looked at the 3 and said in a low voice, "This time, it was a traitor. That person is one of my disciples." This was not a random accusation. Extraterrestrial evil spirits could reincarnate into the world, and as their lifespan increased, they would slowly recover their original memories. As for exactly how he accomplished it, they still hadn't figured it out up until now. It was simply impossible to guard against. It was just that after he obtained the help of that person, he hadn't succeeded again, and that was why he'd been careless. The 3 looked at each other and asked anxiously, "Where is that person?" Yin Liang sneered and said, "I haven't alerted him yet. He has schemed against me once. If I don't return the favor, how can I be satisfied?" Divine Elegance Doc Master Yujirue was puzzled. With that person around, how can such a thing happen? Fairy Mountain's Lord Yin Mu said indifferently, "Maybe after losing more than 10 void realms, that person is dissatisfied with me." Everyone's heart trembled. At the same time, there was a trace of fear. That person was their foundation. If they did not obtain his support, then everything would collapse. Ming Xianling asked solemnly, "Mountain Lord Yin, you have the most contact with that person. Let me ask you, what should we do next?" Master Yu and Master Yin also turned their gazes over. Yin Mu said, "Unless we take back the small realms we lost and make up for the lost spiritual opportunity. However, this is still the bottom line. Only by occupying more void realms will that person be satisfied." Ming Xianling shook his head and said, "This is easier said than done. Now that the battle at Pingchuan boundary is in a stalemate, each sect has sent more than 10 Elephant Realm cultivators over, but they can only barely hold on. It is not impossible to fill in more people, but if there are any losses, it cannot be made up for in a short period of time." Pingchuan boundary's spiritual opportunity was abundant, and it was ranked among the top among the many lower realms of Yunshu realm. They also attached great importance to it, but the evil spirits had strange methods. They were extremely afraid of falling into another trap, so they could only try their best to maintain the current situation and did not dare to do anything else. If they did not solve this problem, they would not dare to do anything else. Yin Xian said indifferently, "I still stand by my previous opinion. With just our Yunshu realm, we cannot stop the evil spirits. Only by allying with people of the same path can we open up the situation." Yujirue sighed and said, "Of course we want to, but the news has long been released. It is just that after so many years, no one from the void realms has appeared. Obviously, they are not willing to help us. Ming Xianling pondered and said, that might be because we have our pride and some other thoughts, so we have not really asked for help. He raised his head and said seriously, fellow Taoists, in this time of danger, to protect our foundation, we should let go of what we should. Chapter 1486. After the four Reverend Mortal Shu decided to ask for help, they sent it out in the form of an edict. Of course, the wording was very tactful, and it did not look like a request for help at all. This was not because they cared about their reputation, but because they did not want their disciples to lose the morale to fight the enemy. They believed that if there were people from beyond the heavens present, they would understand the true meaning of the edict. In fact, there was another advantage to doing this. The evil monsters would definitely receive the news, and they could not be sure if there would be people coming to help, nor would they know how strong the reinforcements would be. As expected, the four of them soon discovered that the evil monsters' attacks had slowed down a little. Clearly, they had some misgivings. Previously, the evil monsters had been constantly attacking, and the Yunshu realm had been too tired to take a breather. Now, they could take advantage of this time to adjust themselves a little. Sima Quan had been hiding in the inner realm, and when he received the news, he immediately reported it to the mountain and sea realm. The reply he received was that he should keep an eye on things for a while longer, and not act rashly, and wait for the right opportunity. After receiving this instruction, he did not go up to make contact with the people of the Yunshu realm, but continued to wait and see. Personally, he was more inclined to this decision, because compared to 150 years ago, the situation in the Yunshu realm had not changed much. They had not been able to retake the small realms that they had lost, but they had not lost any more. This made him certain that the Yunshu realm was not at the point where it could not hold out any longer. In the Azure world, to the southeast was a vast expanse of water, with countless islands. This was where the virtuous Perching Water Pavilion was located, and one of the more famous were the 300 water dwellings. Almost all of the water dwellings were disciples of the sect master Yin Liang, but there were actually only 5 of them who were truly trusted. These people occupied the 5 best lakes in the sect, and Nguanda was one of them. He was usually a little dull and did not speak much, but it was because of this that Yin Liang liked to keep him by his side. Who would have thought that he was the reincarnation of an evil monster? He was the one who had leaked the news that Yin Liang's clone's whereabouts had been exposed. However, after the incident, Yin Liang did not ask him anything, as if nothing had happened. But he knew very well that Yin Liang could not possibly not suspect him, and even thought that he was certain. However, he acted as usual. As long as Yin Liang did not take the initiative to expose him, he was happy to stay. As an evil monster, he did not care much about his life. Even if his physical body was killed, as long as the spirit in the great imperial light was not destroyed, he could still borrow a body to be reborn. Of course, the prerequisite was that he could do what he wanted to do. After all, there were countless spirits like him who were waiting to be reincarnated. They wanted to eat the flesh and blood to eat to the flesh, to strengthen themselves. The greater the contribution, the better the spirit, the greater the value of the of. While he was meditating, a boy's voice came from outside the door. Island Master, Ding Zhenren is here. He has been waiting outside for a while. And good say of this of her oven. Not long after, a handsome man walked in. He was Yin Liang's other disciple, Ding Cheng. As soon as he entered, he sighed and said, "Senior brother and oh, senior brother, why didn't you run away?" And Guanda looked at him and asked, "Why should I run?" Without waiting for his greeting, Ding Chang'an sat down on the praying mat in front of him and said confidently, "Why do you have to hide it, senior brother? Teacher wasn't harmed by you, so how could he have lost that clone?" She then looked at him with a burning gaze. "What do you want to do? Maybe I can help." Instead, he asked curiously, "You all seem to know who I am?" Cauldron Chang'an spat. "Is there anyone who doesn't know?" And Guanda said, "Since you know, then you should also understand that I can't escape." The Cauldron Chang and retreated a little and pointed at him with a smile, saying, "Don't think that I don't know." It's just your physical bodies that can't escape. You're still here, so there must be some other purpose. He then transmitted his voice. In any case, we're brothers. I've said that I'll help you. Now that teacher doesn't seem to be guarding against you, I don't know how many arrangements have been made in the dark. Without an insider, you won't be able to move an inch. Instead of answering, Nguanda asked, "What do you want?" Cauldron Chang, and moved forward and transmitted his voice. I don't want anything else. I just want to be like you, senior brother. Like me? Nguanda looked at him and said, "It seems like you know something." Cauldron Chang and said frankly, "There are many old bamboo slips in the scripture cave, and they're all about strange things that have been abandoned by people. I happen to be interested in these things, but who would have thought that there would be some descriptions of evil spirits in them? I don't know which wise sage wrote them down, but I'm afraid that they didn't dare to write them out in the open and only dared to mix them in these miscellaneous writings. Living people could also become evil spirits, but this required the guidance of evil spirits. After becoming such an evil spirit, as long as there was a bit of the original spirit, they would be immortal, which was much better than cultivating hard. However, this was also because his lifespan was coming to an end, and he didn't want to be guided after reincarnation. Coincidentally, there was such an opportunity in front of him, so he decided to take this path. Nguanda said playfully, "Teacher has treated you well. Why are you doing this?" Cauldron Chung and knocked on the table in front of him and said, "Teacher is indeed a good leader, but he's not a worthy teacher. Look at how he treats third senior brother, and how he treats us." At this point he smiled disdainfully. Does he think that we don't know that third senior brother is his only remaining descendant? I don't care for the position of the future leader, but third senior brother has obtained far more cultivation resources than the others in the same sect. If he can really win against the others, I'll be convinced. However, he's obviously not talented, but he still managed to secure his position by relying on his bloodline. I can't stand it. Cauldron Chang and was not moved by this. He said calmly, "Don't look for excuses. You want to be like us, but that's because you're selfish. It's useless to say these things in front of me, and I don't care about it. As long as you can help me, I'll give you a chance." Cauldron Chang An's expression brightened. He said, "Senior brother, please speak." Cauldron Chang and said, "Before we speak, we can sign a contract. If you don't trust me, I won't trust you either." Cauldron Chang and said happily, "Even if senior brother doesn't mention it, I'll still mention it." The two of them signed the contract on the spot. Cauldron Chang and took the contract and looked at it. He was finally relieved. After signing the contract, even an otherworldly demon would be bound by it. Disobeying one's teacher was not a small crime. If it was exposed, he would definitely die and his soul would be destroyed. There was no turning back now that he had done this. Cauldron Chang and also revealed his purpose. He said, "I'm staying here because I want to find someone." "Oh, is this person also from your sect?" "That's right," Cauldron Chang and said, "You don't need to know the details. As long as you find this person, I'll agree to all your conditions." Cauldron Chang and said, "May I know where this person is?" Cauldron Chang and said, "If I knew, why would I look for you?" Cauldron Chang and was startled. He said, "Senior brother, are you joking? There are so many people in this world. If we don't know for sure, how would we know who this person is and where he is?" Cauldron Chang and thought for a while and said, "There are 2 red lines under this person's tongue, and his life is destined to not be simple." Cauldron Chang and frowned. It was still not easy to find the person. The red lines under the tongue was not a big deal. With his mana, he could see through a person's body. As for the person's life, he did not mention it. Once an evil spirit awakens its memory, it would cause trouble even if it had nothing to do. However, this clue was better than nothing. He thought for a while and came up with a few ideas. Then he looked forward and asked curiously, "I have something to ask you, senior brother. Before you awakened your memory, your life was not much different from the others. In just a few years, you've transformed. Could it be that the friendship between fellow disciples, the kindness between master and disciple, and the ethics of kinship have become worthless? Cauldron Chang's expression did not change at all. He only said, "When you become one of us, you will understand that these are all useless things. Only the true self is what we seek. The body is just like the clothes on your body. If you wear it, you can just change it." Cauldron Chang pondered for a while and said, "What is the true self?" Cauldron Chang said coldly, "You don't have to ask about this anymore. Even if you sign the contract with me, you are still a cultivator." Cauldron Chang said, "Have you met many cultivators?" Cauldron Chang sneered and said, "We have destroyed the Jie Kong and slaughtered countless cultivators. Don't think that your Yunshu realm is special. You can only rely on a talisman left behind by your predecessors to keep us out. Even the old owner of the talisman has been killed by us. How can you fight against me?" Cauldron Chang was very surprised. This was the first time he knew that the old owner of the talisman had died in the hands of an evil spirit. He could not help but feel lucky that he had taken the right step. Otherwise, how could he survive alone when the Yunshu realm was overturned? With a long laugh, he stood up and said, "I will try my best to find this person." He took a step forward and said, "One more thing. Even if Senior Marshal Brother is no longer here, I hope I can fulfill this promise." Cauldron Chang knew what he meant. He looked straight at him and said, "Don't worry. As long as you can do it, I will definitely fulfill my promise." Cauldron Chang cupped his hands and said, "Then I will take my leave now." He walked out of the cave abode and guessed that this person must be an important figure among the evil spirits. He might even be involved in some big secret. Otherwise, there would be no need to spend so much effort to find him. However, this had nothing to do with him. He only needed to find this person and achieve his goal. But not long after he came out, a boy said, "Cauldron Jinren, the headmaster invites you over." Cauldron Chang said calmly, "Lead the way." After following the boy for a while, he saw the clouds in the sky parting, revealing a cave dwelling in the sky. He flew up into the air and walked into the room. He saw Yin Liang half lying on the white jade couch and asked him, "How did the discussion go?" Cauldron Chang bowed and said, "Master, I have already won his trust. I just had to use some tactics." Yin Liang waved his hand and stopped him from continuing. He said with a stern look, "I don't care how you did it. You just need to keep him under control for now. I will have my own ways to deal with him in the future." Visit website. Chapter 1487. Zhang Yan spent some time to make some arrangements in the mansion. Although he had the intention of going out to look for the strength Dao root fruit, he did not immediately set off. There were two reasons for this. Firstly, his own cultivation had only just improved. It turned out that the cultivation method was deduced by himself. At this point, there had already been an earth-shattering change, and he needed to evolve it again to make it more compatible with himself. Secondly, he always felt that there was something that he had not paid attention to, as if he had missed out on something important. This was not simple. At his level, everything that he had seen in the past was vivid in his mind. It was impossible for him to forget anything. The more it was like this, the more it showed that this thing was not simple. It was even to the extent that he could not pry into it at will, so he was obscured by the mysteries of heaven. He thought about it. Since he could not use normal methods to find out, he could only wait for the opportunity to come. At that time, he would naturally understand what it was. This was just like when ordinary people searched for something but could not find it. However, when they did not deliberately seek it, it would appear in front of them inadvertently. Other than these two things, he still needed to observe the situation in Yunshu world. Therefore, he felt that he should stay for a period of time. It would not be too late to decide on his journey after the situation was more or less stabilized. He raised his head and looked down the cliff. There was a faintly discernible spiritual light, as if it was made from starlight. It was innumerable strands of spiritual light that were intertwined together. However, it was not arranged randomly, but it contained some kind of strange pattern. Up until this point, the world-guarding treasure had already begun to take shape. However, he didn't know how long it would take for it to be fully refined. Fortunately, at this step, he didn't have to constantly watch over it, and he just had to find some time to pay attention to it. With a thought, he came out of the Xinyuan small world and sat in the main hall. He dismissed the servants and took out the talisman of the Duzhen Hall Master. He activated all the restrictions in this place so that not a single strand of qi could leak out. Then he took out the sense jade that he obtained from the Scarlet Earth Star. That day, he was only focused on cultivation and did not have time to pay attention to this thing. Now, it was a good time to take a look. This sense jade could make wild demons have spirituality. This was actually not simple. Although cultivators could also enlighten demons with spirituality, the two were actually different. Usually, cultivators would pour a strand of their own consciousness into the consciousness of the demon they wanted to enlighten so that it could speak and walk. However, this generation was limited by nature. Even if they could cultivate and enter the Tao in the future, their achievements would be extremely low. Therefore, in many cases, cultivators like this would throw it away after using it. Even if XNCI brought it along, it would only be a servant to serve her. However, the Will Jade was very different. It was a fundamental change. For example, the feather fur coat was originally just an ordinary little demon. There were many of its kind on the Crimson Blaze planet, and there was nothing special about them. However, after obtaining the Will Jade, he was able to escape from the hands of the Taoist heavenly abode after cultivating for only a few thousand years. Although that was just an accident, it was still commendable. Based on this result, as long as this item was placed in Tianqing Hall, it would only take a few hundred years for it to breed a large group of rare birds and beasts. However, he still did not know much about this item. He needed to verify it a few times before he could make a decision. He held it in his hand and looked at it for a while. He thought to himself, this sense jade has its own consciousness. I can't force it. I need to find a way to guide it. His mind moved silently. Not long after, an ordinary mountain rock flew in from outside. It was about the size of a fist. He shook his sleeve again and set up a formation in the middle of the hall. He placed the rock inside and at the same time, he placed the sense jade in it. Generally speaking, putting aside the strange beasts that were favored by the heavens and earth, based on their potential, the birds and beasts that were the easiest to be enlightened were the birds and beasts of the land, followed by the aquatic creatures, then the vermin and the grass and wood elves. Lastly, the ones that were at the bottom were the metal and stone elves. If there were no accidents, even if they were to bathe in spiritual vigor for billions of years, there might not be any changes. There was actually another way. If the metal and stone were shaped by a skilled craftsman, after interacting with people for a long time, they could also develop some spirituality. However, this mountain rock had not been sculpted. It was just a piece of stubborn rock. He wanted to give it a try and see if the Will Jade could also change it. He took out another spell and summoned the formation spirit. He said, take this rock out of the formation once a day and put it back after 4 hours. This was to let the sense jade know that if it wanted to get out of the formation, it could only find a way through this rock, just like what it did on the red scorching earth star. The formation spirit bowed and said, I understand. After Zhang Yan gave the order, he did not pay attention to it anymore. He continued to sit on the couch to deduce the cultivation method. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. When he woke up from his meditation, he looked towards the formation. However, he found that in just a few years, there was a change in the rock. There was a stone heart the size of a grain of sand growing inside. Although it was only a little, it was extremely dazzling in his eyes. Unknowingly, he was a little surprised. This was a change in the nature of the stone. What was even more extraordinary was that after it had the stone heart, the stone had already begun to absorb spiritual energy from the outside world. If this continued, it would probably become a psychic jade stone after 100 years. After a few thousand years, it might even be able to try to transform. Most of the monsters of metal and stone in the world, which one of them did not achieve it after billions of years. However, after thinking about it, it made sense. When the sense jade was still sealed, it could only rely on a little leakage of qi dynamic to illuminate the feather coat. Now that there was no cover, the effect was even more extraordinary. In the past, the sense jade itself was not without consumption, but it was only a little. If it was not someone of his realm, he would not be able to notice it. He nodded secretly. The person who could refine this treasure was really amazing. This item might not be of much use to ordinary disciples, but it was extremely useful to mortal cultivators like him who could fly to other worlds. If he brought it to other worlds, as long as it settled in the world where there were living creatures for thousands of years, he could create a large number of subordinates who would listen to his orders. This was much easier than imparting techniques and establishing a sect. The most important thing was that there was no fear of loss. Even if all of them died, as long as the sense jade still existed, he could create them again. From this point of view, this was probably the original intention of creating this item. He changed his mind again and said, "Such an amazing item. If this item is compatible with my realm protection treasure, what will happen?" Then he shook his head and smiled. This was just a thought. Not to mention that he had already deduced all the steps of refining a Dharma treasure clearly, he couldn't be at ease using it on his own Dharma treasure before he figured out the origin of this object. He waved his hand and removed the formation. He put the sense jade back into his sleeve and thought, "I'll leave it here for now. In the future, when I go to outer space, it might come in handy." After packing up, he settled his mind and sat still in the hall, continuing to deduce techniques. After sitting for 5 years, the 2 realms dial on the table suddenly made a sound. He opened his eyes and channeled his mana into it. Sima Quan's figure appeared in the spiritual light and bowed to him, saying, "Greetings, Master." Zhang Yan nodded and returned the greeting, saying, "Zhenren Sima, is there any change in the Yunshu realm again?" Sima Quan said, "Not long ago, there was another edict sent from the realm. However, the original edict was written in the eroded text, and with my cultivation, I could not read it. Since it is so serious, I think the matter is not simple, so I would like to ask Zhenren to take a look." As he said this, he took out a letter from his sleeve and opened it in front of him. Zhang Yan looked at it. It was indeed written in the eroded text and was not complicated. It was just that the realm of a cultivator was not high enough, so it was difficult for him to understand it. After some deduction, he read it smoothly. This was another letter asking for help. It said that the evil monsters were attacking fiercely, and the Yunshu realm could not withstand the danger. It begged for help from fellow cultivators from outer space. In the end, it also said that the evil monsters were the common enemy of all cultivators, and only by killing them could the universe be clear. After reading it, he said, "Has there been any change in the Yunshu realm recently?" Sima Quan said, "There is no big change, but not long ago, another lower realm was lost. The inner realm seemed to be in a panic for a while, but it soon calmed down." Zhang Yan pondered for a while. The real situation in the Yunshu realm was not as simple as losing a lower realm. The real situation should be more serious, otherwise, there was no need to send out such an edict. It was likely that the disciples under them knew the real situation and lost their fighting spirit. But in that case, could it be that the evil monsters can't read the eroded text? He changed his mind and asked Sima Quan a few more questions about the layout of the Yunshu realm. After listening, he shook his head. He didn't know why, but the people of this realm seemed to have no intention of fighting back. They were just defending and letting the evil monsters attack. As the saying goes, a prolonged defense is bound to be lost. As time went on, mistakes were bound to appear. However, if the Yunshu realm was completely occupied by the evil monsters, that would not be a good thing. From what he knew, the evil monsters were invading spiritual opportunity everywhere. They were very aggressive, and once they were done with this place, they would most likely change their target. Although they might not come to the mountain and sea realm, they couldn't rely on luck. This was especially true when the sects of the 9 continents were facing the threat of that almighty being. They had to expand outwards, and it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't run into him in the future. The only way was to find a way to keep the evil monsters here while the mountain and sea realms slowly built up its strength. That was the right thing to do. Having made up his mind, he used his divine will to go to that mysterious place and inform sect leader Qin and the other reverend mortals of the matter. He also suggested that Reverend Sima try to get in touch with the evil monsters. As for the manpower he needed, he could get it from the Junchen realm. Although the Junchen realm had been through many battles, there were still many true monarchs. Most of them had already signed the Dharma indenture, and were now completely under the command of the Mountain and Sea realm. This was a very powerful force. Other than Rao Jifeng and Bei Xiangtong, no one else knew where the Mountain and Sea realm was. Even if they were plotted against, or if they were accidentally possessed by the gargoyles, they wouldn't have to worry about the Mountain and Sea realm being exposed. The only thing that could possibly be exposed was the existence of the Smoke-Wavy realm. As the lower realm of the Junchen realm, almost every true monarch knew how to get there. However, that place was now occupied by that almighty true Yang expert, and if the evil monsters were to follow him there, it would be very interesting. Chapter 1488. Zhang Yan waited for the meeting to end before he withdrew his spirit. Sima Quan was still waiting there. Fortunately, with the communication of the spirit, no matter how long it took, what the outside world felt was only an instant. Therefore, he did not know that in this instant, the few spiritual masters of Mortal Slough had reached a consensus. Zhang Yan said, "Spiritual Master Sima, I have talked with the few spiritual masters. Now that I have given you the identity of an emissary, you can try to get in touch with the cultivators of Yunshu realm. Tell them that we, the 9 continents, are willing to help because we are all cultivators. However, you have to pay attention to a few places. You must make sure that they tell me everything they know about the evil monsters without holding anything back. After that, discuss with them about the matter of returning Jiaohua realm. If they agree, then we can continue the discussion. However, you have to know the limits." Sima Quan knew that getting back Jiaohua was only the bottom line. It was best to take this chance to get more lower realms. He thought for a while and said, "May I ask spiritual masters, what can the 9 continents offer as a bargaining chip this time?" Zhang Yan said, "If the matter is settled, then the 9 continents will prepare to send cultivators of Junchen realm to help. Do you understand?" Sima Quan understood. Sima Quan understood tacitly. He had hidden in Junchen Jie for hundreds of years, so he immediately knew what was going on. He said, "Sima understands." Then, Sage Zhang and everyone, please wait for Sima's reply. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Spiritual Master Sima, you have to be careful. You have the body of the Sky Devil. If you walk to the front of the stage, you have to be careful when facing the cultivators of Yunshu realm. However, you have to be wary of the evil monsters. I will pass you an etching rune seal. When the cultivators of Yunshu realm see it, they will know your identity." After that, he drew a talisman in the air. Sima Quan did not know what it meant, but he memorized it. He then said, "Zhenren Zhang, Zhenren Yun is still here." Much of the information that was sent here was also obtained by him. He asked me to ask if there is anything that needs to be done in the sect. Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, "Tell him that the Jiahua domain was originally the home of his Cloud Whale clan, and we will take it back sooner or later. He has already been in the Yunshu domain for a long time, and has made great contributions. I will make the decision for Zihong here. From now on, he will no longer be an in-name disciple, but a disciple of my Xinyuan branch." Sima Quan said solemnly, "Sima will pass on the message. Zhang Yan, I may go into seclusion for a period of time. If Taoist Master Sima has something to say, you can discuss it with Meng Zhen." Sima Quan said yes and said a few more words. Then, he dispersed the spiritual light and put away the dual realm dial. Just now, although they were separated by the dial, he could feel that Zhang Yan seemed to be different from before. However, after a while, when he thought about it again, he found that it was somewhat wrong. That feeling was not as strong as before. His heart shuddered. This kind of situation should not have happened to him. He could not help but guess that this person's cultivation had improved again. At the same time, he also thought, now that my cultivation has reached a juncture, there are many demons among the evil spirits. If I can find some and refine them, they might help me achieve success. Thinking about this, he immediately sat down and circulated his cultivation to observe. Although the demon had swallowed his clone last time, it was actually just a strand of his demonic thoughts. Not only did he not suffer any losses because of it, he even followed that strand of qi and found the location of the demon. At best, this demon was similar to the Yuanning cultivators. However, after coming to Yunshu realm, it had continuously caused chaos in a few small sects, and its strength had greatly increased. He did not refine this demon before because he was prepared to follow the clues and see if he could catch the evil spirit that had arrived earlier. However, after waiting for a long time, he found that this demon's actions were messy and did not seem to be under someone's orders. In fact, he did not even see it interact with anyone. Thus, he boldly deduced that this demon might have been deliberately placed in Yunshu realm by the evil spirits to cause chaos in this realm. Apart from that, there was no other purpose. It seems that whether or not these evil spirits can restrain the demon will have to wait and see. However, it does not matter. This time, there should be more than one demon. Once I find them one by one, I will be able to investigate clearly. Perhaps it was very difficult for others to find demons, but as a heavenly demon, it was very easy for him. However, he still needed to be careful. Similarly, if the Gen'in demon wanted to find him, there might not be much trouble. The bronze mask passed down by Grandmaster Ling Yu could only be used for a moment of emergency, but it might not be able to avoid all dangers. The person he was currently possessing was a Yuanning elder of Yenguang Mountain, one of the 12 forces of Yunshu realm. His name was Bai Wenjiu. Because of this person's eccentric personality, he usually did not get along with his fellow sect members, and his lifespan was gradually coming to an end. Thus, he was stationed in the White Realm. Apart from the monthly routine of replying to the sect, he had almost no contact with them. To him, there was no more suitable candidate to possess. After he made his decision, he came out of the cave abode. A boy standing at the door asked, "Shinran, are you going out to visit a friend?" Sima Quan said, "Yes, I'm going out for a while. On the way, I need to pick some spiritual flowers and herbs in the mountains. Prepare a flying carriage for me. If there are any questions from the sect, just answer truthfully." The boy said, "Yes, sir." After a while, Sima Quan boarded the flying carriage and headed to the place where the demon was hiding. 2 days later, he arrived at a misty, picturesque forest by the riverside. From the map, it seemed to be the base of a small sect. Looking down from the clouds, he saw people coming and going in an endless stream. There was even the sound of singing and laughter, and it was peaceful and serene. However, he knew that although everything seemed normal on the surface, in reality, everyone had long been infected by the devil qi. It was just that the demon had not refined the essence qi it had swallowed previously, so it had not done anything yet. Once it succeeded, it would immediately sweep this place clean. At that time, from top to bottom, no one would be able to escape this calamity. It would take at least more than 10 days for the demon to come out. He did not have the mood to wait any longer. He turned into a gust of chilly wind and floated down, straight into the ground. The demon seemed to have sensed something, but the difference between the two was too great. Before it could react, it was absorbed into Sima Quan's body and instantly refined into the purest essence qi. Although the demon was dead, if the devil qi in the outside world was not extinguished, it would use the cultivator's essence qi as nourishment. As time passed, a new demon would be born. Sima Quan pondered for a moment. There was no guarantee that the evil spirits would have a way to investigate the movements of these demons, so it was better to get rid of them all. Thus, he circled around and collected all the devil qi. Then, he turned into a cloud of turbid smoke and fled. The cultivators in this small sect only felt a gust of chilly wind blow past, and they all shuddered at the same time. A few days later, everyone in the sect, regardless of their cultivation, had their vitality greatly damaged. They invited an expert to take a look, but they did not know what was going on. They were afraid that it was the work of evil spirits, so they could only reluctantly give up on this place and move the sect elsewhere. Sima Quan had been traveling outside for 3 months and had taken care of more than 10 demons, but none of them were related to evil spirits. He felt that he would not be able to find any useful clues for the time being, so he turned west. 3 days later, he arrived at the bottom of a high cliff. This was the place where the door to the lower realm was. Yun Jiang was currently staying here with Zhan Mo Ping. Zhan Mo Ping had relied on the merits of exterminating the vicious demons to successfully enter the Yuanying realm. Now, he was willing to become the realm guardian elder. Unlike in the past, this position was now extremely dangerous, and many people were afraid that they would be targeted by evil spirits. It turned out that some of the realm guardian elders had also requested to be transferred. Under these circumstances, he had successfully ascended to this position. He had no choice but to do this. The senior and junior brothers in the sect were not on good terms with him, and Elder Hong had never given up on finding trouble with him. In order to protect himself, he could only make this choice. At this moment he saw a white-haired Daoran come in from outside. Looking at his aura, he was also of Yuanying cultivation. He bowed and said, "Where did this fellow Taoist come from?" Sima Quan reported the name and origin of this body and said, "Daoran is going to refine a treasure recently, and there is a precious material called the welcome incense wood. It can only be produced by the one high realm that fellow Taoist guards. I wonder if fellow Taoist has a collection here?" One of the important reasons why the realm guardian elder was valued was that he had gotten his hands on many precious materials and external medicines that were offered from the lower realm. If it wasn't for the evil spirits plundering, who would be willing to give them up? Although Zhan Mo Ping felt like he was sitting on the mouth of a volcano every day, he had never worried about external things like before. He smiled and said, "I have quite a few here. Fellow Taoist can follow me to the storehouse to choose. If you see something suitable, you can take it." On the other side, Yun Jiang was floating in the heavenly lake on the cliff. At this moment, a voice sounded in her mind, "Fellow Taoist Yun, is it convenient for you to speak?" Yun Jiang's body moved slightly and she said, "Is this Taoist Sima?" A blurry spirit light appeared in the lake and gathered into an indistinct figure. Sima Quan said, "Taoist Yun, I'm here to tell you a piece of news. Since you've sent a lot of useful information back to the realm, Taoist Zhang has already made the decision on behalf of Taoist Wei to take you in as a disciple of the Xinyuan faction. You're no longer an in-name disciple." When Yun Jiang heard this, she was extremely excited. Waves surged in the lake, causing Zhan Mo Ping to look over in confusion. Yun Jiang quickly calmed her emotions and sent a mental message back. She said gratefully, "Thank you, Taoist Sima, for telling me. I can't complete the ceremony, please forgive me." Sima Quan said, "You don't have to say that. You and I are on the same path, and we're in the realm beyond the realm. We should help each other. I'm here to find Taoist Yun not only to pass on this message, but also to ask for a favor." Yun Jiang said seriously, "Please speak, Taoist Yun." Sima Quan said, "I was asked by the Taoists to find a way to get in touch with the upper echelons of the Yun Shu realm. I thought there wouldn't be any danger on this trip, but we've never had any contact before, so we need to be on guard. I'll set up a secret message with Taoist Yun. If I don't reply after a while, it means something has happened. I hope Taoist Yun can inform the inner realm in time." Yun Jiang said seriously, "I won't let you down." Sima Quan said, "I'll leave this two realms dial with you, Taoist Yun." He took out the dial and waited for Yun Jiang to put it away before saying, "I'll leave now." Yun Jiang said, "Please take care, Taoist Yun." Sima Quan nodded and his figure gradually disappeared. At the same time, the possessed body had also chosen a few treasures. After bidding farewell to Zhan Mo Ping, he looked up at the sky and flew towards the place where the Azure World's door was. Chapter 1489. Sima Quan soared into the sky. Previously, when he returned to the sky, there was a light that shone down, making it difficult for him to hide his tracks. This time, he was here as an envoy, so there was no need for him to hide anymore. If he was shown on by the light, it would instead serve the purpose of alerting the other party. At this moment, above the sky, a crystal mirror was slowly rotating. A female cultivator on guard suddenly exclaimed, "Pavilion Master Yun, a demon has been discovered here." Pavilion Master Yun suddenly opened her eyes and turned into a streak of golden chi. She shot down from high above and approached. Her phoenix eyes were filled with power as she asked in a serious voice, "Where?" As she spoke, she also saw a Taoist flying toward them. Although the Taoist robe he wore was the style of Yanguang Mountain, one of the 12 forces, under the reflection of the mirror, he was shrouded by a mass of yin qi. It was obvious that the demon had taken over his body. Moreover, he did not conceal himself at all when he flew. This demon is coming toward me?" The female cultivator on guard suddenly widened her eyes. These people were only responsible for supervision, so their thoughts were more meticulous than their peers. However, they did not have much battle experience. Seeing that the demon was coming toward them aggressively, they were momentarily afraid. Pavilion Master Yun said calmly, "Don't panic. There is the most powerful formation here in the spiritual mirror. If this demon comes, he will be seeking his own death." However, she was slightly angry in her heart. She had never seen such an arrogant demon. Usually, when a demon was discovered, they would turn and run, but she had never seen one that took the initiative to charge at them. With a flip of her wrist, a streak of golden light was sent out. Although there was a formation to protect them, out of caution, she still prepared to summon the spiritual masters of the various sects to come and capture the demon together. Not long after the spiritual message was sent out, light gradually rose. 3 formation doors in the sky opened at the same time, and at the same time, the figures of 3 elephant realm cultivators appeared. However, at the same time, the vast atmosphere instantly caused the entire spiritual mirror to shake. Many female cultivators instantly turned pale and found it difficult to breathe. Pavilion Master Yun frowned and said, "Can the 3 of you restrain yourselves? The junior disciples here can't withstand your aura." The 3 of them looked at each other and withdrew their chi activity. A blue-robed cultivator stepped forward and cupped his hands, saying, "We rushed here as soon as we received the alarm. We thought that a great enemy had entered Lingjian, so we released the deterrents. Please forgive us, Pavilion Master Yun." Another cold-faced Taoist interrupted, "We can talk about unimportant things later." Pavilion Master Yun, what happened? Pavilion leader Yun also knew that this wasn't the time to be fussing over these things. She stepped aside and said, "Please take a look, there's a devil heading this way." "Demon?" The blue-robed cultivator was slightly surprised. Then he became furious. Since when did demons become so bold? They clearly knew that they had been discovered, but they still dared to reveal themselves like this? Did they really think that the cultivators of the Yunshu realm were easy to mess with? The 3 of them immediately turned into streaks of light and flew down to meet him. Pavilion Master Yun was also an elephant realm cultivator, but she had to guard the Lingjian, so she couldn't leave without permission. However, it was expected that it wouldn't be difficult for 3 elephant realm cultivators with devil-subduing artifacts to deal with an exposed sky demon. As soon as the 3 of them arrived, they each stood at a corner and surrounded Sima Quan. In their eyes, this demon's behavior was too abnormal. They couldn't figure out what he was up to, so they were extra careful. Sima Quan met the 3's wary gazes and cupped his hands, saying, "Greetings, fellow Taoists." The blue-robed cultivator said in disdain, "Demon, don't try to show off here. Don't think that you're human just because you're wearing a human skin." Sima Quan chuckled and replied, "You don't have to be like this. My Taoist name is Quan Chi, and I'm here at the invitation of the Yunshu realm. I don't have any ill intentions. If the Yunshu realm changes its mind, I'll just turn around and leave. There's no need to make a big fuss over this and hurt our friendship." The youngest Taoist among the 3 angrily rebuked, "Nonsense. When did the Yunshu realm ever invite a demon like you to come here?" However, at this moment, the blue-robed cultivator stretched out his hand and said, "Reverend Shan, wait. Let me ask him a few questions." Reverend Shan revealed a look of disbelief and said, "Reverend Xiang, don't tell me you're listening to this demon?" The blue-robed cultivator said, "There's no harm in listening. We're all here, so why should we be afraid that he'll escape?" It could be seen that the blue-robed cultivator had a lot of prestige. When Reverend Shan heard what he said, he stopped talking for the time being, but he still had a vigilant look on his face. The blue-robed cultivator looked at Sima Quan and said, "You said you were invited here. Do you have any proof?" Sima Quan said, "Of course I do." He took out the eroded text edict and said, "This is an edict created by the true one of your realm. It says that we are inviting fellow Taoists from beyond the heavens to fight against evil. I received this edict and presented it to the sect. After the true one read it, the sect sent I here to discuss an alliance with your side." The blue-robed cultivator frowned. He knew that there was such an edict, but he couldn't understand what was written on it. This was because it was clearly beyond his current cultivation realm. If what the other party said was true, and no matter what the other party's purpose was, there must be an even more profound Almighty behind him. In that case, this matter couldn't be ignored. He looked at Sima Quan with a scrutinizing gaze and said, "I can see that the person you've taken over is a cultivator from the Yunshu realm's Yenguang Mountain. Since you said you were invited here, why did you take over the body of a cultivator from my realm?" Sima Quan said, "Don't worry, fellow Taoist. I'm just borrowing his body for convenience, but I can guarantee his safety. After this, I'll give him a longevity pill as compensation." The blue-robed cultivator frowned and said, "Since you came with good intentions, why did you do this?" Sima Quan said, "With my current appearance, your side is already very cautious. If I came with my real body, how would your side be willing to talk to me? I'm afraid you'll start shouting to kill me the moment you see me." The blue-robed cultivator couldn't help but ponder. At the side, Zhenren Shan couldn't help but say, "Zhenren Xiang, demons are used to deceiving people. Don't trust him easily." Sima Quan said, "I know you don't believe me, but I have to say this. If I want to harm your side, wouldn't it be better to hide? But I don't need to show myself to meet you. Don't you think so?" The blue-robed cultivator nodded slowly. Seeing that he was moved, Zhenren Shan interrupted, "Wait. Although you claim that you're harmless to us, I'm still worried about you." Sima Quan said, "What do you want?" Zhenren Shan stared at him and said, "I have a magic tool to subdue demons here. Let me imprison you so that we can be at ease." Sima Quan shook his head, "I'm an emissary. If I do that, it'll be a disgrace to the sect behind me. If you insist, I won't hesitate even if I have to fight with you here." Zhenren Shan sneered and said, "Do you think I don't dare?" The cold-faced cultivator also said, "That kind of rule is for friends. Now that your identity is unknown, and you've secretly stolen my fellow Taoist body, based on your actions, shouldn't you be on guard?" Sima Quan smiled and didn't argue with him. He knew that the other party already somewhat believed him. He just wanted to use words to suppress his spirit. He didn't really want to do anything to him. Otherwise, there would be no need to say anything and he could just make a move. If it really came to that, he could just use the bronze mask to escape. Even if he gave up this body, he could still reform it with his clone. That's enough. The blue-robed cultivator stopped the two from continuing and said to Sima Quan, "Zhenren Quan Xing, I can't fully believe what you've said. I'll have to report this to the higher-ups. Please wait here for a while." Sima Quan said, "Of course." He paused for a while and took out a jade scroll and said, "I know you have doubts. This was given to me by my sex Zhenren. It can prove what I've said." The blue-robed cultivator's expression was serious. He used his mana to pull it over. After looking at it for a while, he didn't see anything strange except for some indecipherable inscriptions. After thinking for a while, he took out a jade talisman and imprinted his memory on it. Then he used his mana to activate it and sent it out. After that, he and the other person stood outside without letting their guard down, always maintaining their vigilance. However, the response came faster than they had imagined. In less than half a day, they saw a gap in the sky, and a flying raft descended. On it stood an old Taoist with a calm aura and a smile. The three of them were stunned when they saw him. They quickly bowed and said, "Greetings, Zhenren Ku." This Daoran seemed to have a high status. Sima Quan looked at him but couldn't see through his cultivation. He knew that this person wasn't at the mortal metamorphosis level, but he was very close. Zhenren Ku looked at the scene and bowed to Sima Quan. He said with a smile, "Are you Taoist Quan Ming?" Sima Quan returned the bow and said, "Taoist Quan Ming, I'm Taoist Quan Ming." Zhenren Ku stroked his beard and said, "Forgive me for being presumptuous, but do you have the body of a heavenly demon?" Sima Quan said, "I do have the body of a heavenly demon. However, I wasn't born like this. I cultivated it." Zhenren Ku said with surprise, "I see that you're clear and bright. You're no different from a normal Taoist cultivator. You actually have such a marvelous technique. It seems like the origin of your inheritance isn't simple." Sima Quan didn't say anything and just bowed. Zhenren Ku smiled and didn't ask any more. He said, "Taoist Quan, please get on this raft." Sima Quan agreed and got on the raft. Just now, when he stepped on the raft, the scenery in front of him changed. There were pavilions and towers, and there were mountains everywhere. They weren't illusions, and he couldn't tell what kind of technique was used. He thought to himself, Yunshu realm can control dozens of lower realms. This space illusion technique is extraordinary. If I can get it, it will be very beneficial to the 9 continents. I can try to include this condition in this negotiation. Zhenren Ku said, "There's still a long way to go. Taoist Quan, please follow me into the pavilion." Sima Quan gladly obeyed. After a while, the raft turned into a spiritual light and rose up. The gap in the sky also gradually closed. The blue-robed cultivator and the other 2 watched it go away. They felt very complicated. They knew that the situation was not good. The evil spirits were pressing on, and the few Shangzhen were already trying to find their fellow Taoists from beyond the heavens. However, the person who returned was a heavenly demon. It was hard to know what the person behind him was planning, and such a force suddenly appeared in the lower realm. They didn't know whether it was good or bad. It was hard to say what the future of Yunshu realm would be like. Chapter 1490. Sima Quan followed the raft, and when he looked outside, he could only see the mountains and rivers. He had no idea where he was going or where he was going. However, he had no intention of asking about this right now, and the 9 continents had no intention of invading another's realm. In the boundless heavens, it was fate to run into people who walked the same path. Once a fight broke out, the powerful cultivators would usually fight first. People who could cultivate to this level all cherished their lives. Unless they were forced into a corner, few would be willing to do so. Like the Junchen realm, who had been hostile the moment they arrived, they had been forced into a corner. As long as there was a place to go, Kong Yin wouldn't choose to stake everything on one throw. The mountain and sea realm wasn't at that point yet. At least for the next 10,000 years, it would be safe. At that time, it was hard to say how strong the cultivators of the various sects would be. They might even be able to compete with that true Yang cultivator. Taoist didn't seem to be an ascetic cultivator. He was very worldly and witty. Although he had tried to test Sima Quan, most of the time, he knew when to stop, so he didn't offend Sima Quan. Sima Quan had been on the raft for a long time. Although it was dark here, it was difficult to be sure. He didn't care about that, but he was calculating the heavens. After calculating, he found that he had waited in the inner realm for a total of 5 days. He remembered that Daoren had only taken half a day to arrive, but now he hadn't. He didn't know if Daoren was doing this on purpose, but he didn't say anything. Right now, the most important thing was the Yunshu realm, so he could stay here. Every day, he would talk with Taoist Ku about the Shenluan Dao, then he would go back to cultivate. It was no different from cultivating in his cave. A few more days passed, and Taoist Ku invited Sima Quan over. After Sima Quan sat down, he smiled and asked, "Fellow Taoist Quan Ming, do you feel any different these days?" Sima Quan's heart trembled. He didn't avoid the topic and bluntly said, "I seem to have spent a bit more time on the road." Spiritual Master Ku smiled mysteriously and said, "I'm afraid you don't know, but the time I used to travel to and fro is the same." Sima Quan couldn't help but feel a little surprised. His first reaction was that his senses had been deceived by the other party's spell, causing him to make a wrong judgment. However, he instantly realized what the other party really wanted to say. He unconsciously straightened his body, looked over, and said, Is there a difference in time between the inner and outer realms? Perfected Ku smiled and stroked his beard. He nodded and said, "That's right." Sima Quan was also secretly surprised and said, "Based on the time in your world, about 10 days have passed. That means that we have been here for more than 20 days, but only 1 day has passed in the outside world?" "Exactly," Ku Jinren said. Sima Quan praised, "Good method. If this is used for cultivation, it can create many experts in a short period of time. However, there should be some limitations, right?" Perfected Ku admitted, "Not only is there a limitation, but it's not a small one. In these 10 days, the amount of spiritual vigor used is 1,000 times more than what is normally used. Even if the spiritual vigor in the inner realms is flourishing, it can't withstand such a consumption. It's just that I'm receiving an esteemed guest. Just now I'm able to activate this magical power." Sima Quan cupped his hands in greeting. This was not because he had gained much advantage over the past few days. More importantly, the other party had treated him with such courtesy. They had truly treated him as an envoy. Furthermore, through this method, the people of the Yunshu realm did not need to say anything. They had displayed their deep foundation to him. This was both a show of force and a show of respect. However, he didn't really believe the magical power that the other party mentioned. He had stayed in Junshin realm before. Even Kong Ing didn't have this kind of ability. If he wanted to go further, if there were really such powerful cultivators, then there was no need to ask for help. Therefore, he was more inclined to his previous judgment. There was a very powerful talisman in this Yunshu realm, which was why they could use this ability. Kudaoran looked in a certain direction and said, "We're here." As soon as he said this, the original scenery disappeared. In its place was a high cliff with a sea of clouds. The surroundings were vast and boundless, and the spiritual vigor was incomparably clear. Sima Quan looked at it and thought to himself, "This should be the azure world. The spiritual vigor here is much higher than the ordinary realms of our mountain and sea realm. I wonder what the violet realm is like." Of course, it wasn't that the spiritual vigor of the mountain and sea realm was weaker than this realm. After all, the Yunshu realm had dozens of spiritual vigor from the lower realms. Furthermore, it had divided itself into 4 realms, and almost all of the essence was gathered in one place. Furthermore, it didn't allow the lower generation cultivators to touch it. It was far superior. When Zhan Moping met Yunjiang, he had called himself the great spiritual upper realm of the Yunshu realm. In terms of spiritual vigor, it wasn't an exaggeration. Kudaoran said, "Fellow Taoist Quan Ming, please invite I over." Sima Quan followed him down the raft and walked along the mountain path to the temple on the cliff. Taoist Ku invited him to an immortal's cave and settled him down. He said, "I will go and make arrangements for fellow Taoist to meet the exalted true ones. I will have to trouble fellow Taoist to stay here for a few days. I know that fellow Taoist doesn't need clear spiritual qi for your cultivation, so I have to absorb some impure qi from elsewhere. However, it may not be enough. If fellow Taoist is lacking in any way, please forgive me." Sima Quan said, "Fellow Taoist, you're exaggerating. I'll just take a look at this place. It's much better than the abode I found myself. In a while, I'll release this body and let this fellow Taoist wake up." Kudaoran waved his hand and said, "There's no need to be in such a hurry. The exalted true ones don't care about such things. Besides, there are some places in the inner realm that fellow Taoist can't enter with just his devil body alone." Sima Quan nodded and said, "Then let's do as fellow Taoist says." Old Taoist Ku smiled, cupped his hands, and walked out of the hall. When he was outside, he didn't seem to do anything, but his whole body swayed and suddenly disappeared from the air. When he reappeared, he was already standing on a cloud platform. There were 4 balls of clear light in front of him, and he could vaguely make out the silhouettes of 4 people. He stepped forward and bowed, saying, "Disciple Kupinga pays his respects to the headmaster and the 3 venerables." He came from the Great Might Heavenly Palace, so Palace Master Ming Xianling asked, "Pinga, what is this person like?" Old Taoist Ku thought for a moment and said, "The inheritance behind this person is not simple. That method of stirring the inside and outside of the world gate, and changing the time of spring and autumn, I only had to give him a hint, and he immediately understood it. Furthermore, after careful observation these few days, I did not find any similarities between him and the evil spirits. At least, he was not sent by that place. The four of them looked at each other. Aside from Yin Liang, the other three nodded. In fact, after seeing the book of eroding civilization that Zhang Yan had given them, they believed that Sima Quan wasn't sent by the evil spirits. Evil spirits could read ordinary eroding runes, but the more profound they were, the more difficult it was to understand. After all, it contained a cultivator's understanding of the Grand Tao. Both sides had different paths. At first, they could understand a bit, but as they went on, they would become very different. This was one of the ways to distinguish evil spirits from spirit masters. Most importantly, Zhang Yan's eroding runes were very brilliant. Some parts of the eroding runes were very obscure and difficult to understand. This meant that the other party's cultivation was very likely higher than theirs. To be able to cultivate to such a level, there must be a huge force supporting him. Therefore, they could roughly confirm that there was no problem with his background. The dock master of Shinshio Dock, Yu Jirue, said, "Should we invite him here?" Yin Liang spoke at this moment. "Wait, we can wait a bit more. We must be careful and not make a rash decision. This person is a demon after all. He had been tricked not long ago, so he didn't trust Sima Quan who suddenly appeared out of nowhere." Yu Jirue asked, "Then what does Dock Master Yin want?" Yin Liang's face darkened as he said, "Let me take a look at him and see what his past is like. If he's really from the same realm, then I'll let him come over and talk things out with him. But if he's not, wouldn't we be able to avoid a disaster?" Yu Jirue shook his head and said, "That's not appropriate. No matter what, this person is now an emissary. If he really is sent by someone from the same world, isn't this a provocation? If we anger this person, won't we be making a fool of ourselves?" Yin Liang said impatiently, "What realm is he at? I'm here using the ritual implement to take a look, and I'll return after a while. So what if he can sense it?" Yu Jirue shook his head. It seemed that Yin Liang's heavy injuries had affected his temperament. Although he was opposed to this, there was no need to argue with him over this. Also, as Yin Liang said, using the ritual implement to take a look would only take an instant. With Taoist Kuan Yin's cultivation, even if he could sense it, he wouldn't know what had happened. Ming Xianling and Yin Xian didn't express their opinions either, clearly agreeing to this. Yin Liang flipped his hand and took out an octagonal copper plate. He guided his mana, and Sima Quan's image appeared on the plate. Of course, this wasn't the appearance of the cultivator at Mount Yanguang, but a ball of yin qi. He snorted and used his technique to take a look. Sima Quan was sitting in meditation at this moment. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong, but he didn't know what the problem was. He thought to himself that maybe the other party was spying on him. A mortal cultivator had to pay a high price to look into the past of a fellow cultivator, but he was a sky devil, and his cultivation was only similar to that of the enlightened master. It was easy for him to be looked into. But since the 9 continents dared to send him here, how could they not be prepared? He took out a concealment talisman and was about to use it, but at this moment, the bronze mask hidden on his body suddenly shook, and the hollow eyes seemed to brighten. Inexorably, as if he was being pulled, he couldn't help but put down the talisman, pick up the mask, and put it on his face. Almost immediately, he felt a gaze from beyond the heavens, landing on him. But it was only for a moment, and that feeling quickly faded away. He thought about it, and guessed that Yunshu's realm was really looking into his background. This matter couldn't be explained clearly, but he made a note in his heart. When the time came, he would definitely try to get back at the conditions they had discussed. On the other side, Yin Liang retracted his technique, but there was a hint of suspicion in the depths of his eyes. Ming Xianling said, "Master Yin Liang, how is it?" Yin Liang composed himself, shook his head, and said nothing. He didn't know what he saw, but he thought about it carefully. Just now, the memory he saw seemed to be lost, and he couldn't find it no matter how hard he tried. What made him annoyed was that he didn't know what kind of method it was. The three of them looked at each other, thinking that he didn't see anything, and just didn't want to say it because of his face. Yujirue said, "Since there's no problem with this person, we don't have to wait too long. I think we can invite him here tomorrow, and we can discuss the matter of fighting against the evil monsters." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.